Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day two of the Talent Strategy and Acquisition Summit. I'm Sneha from the Hacking HR team, and I'm so excited to be moderating this first session of the day on the topic we all have a unique relationship with, which is hiring tech. Whether you're trying to speed things up, scale processes, or just stop using spreadsheets for interviews, the right tools can make or break your hiring success. We all know that. But with so many options out there at this time, which is the ADS, CRMs, AI tools, assessment bots, it can start to feel like a little tech jungle. You know what I mean? So that's where this incredible panel comes in. We are joined by folks who have been working on this for a very long time and have deep in tech trenches, and you know what works and what doesn't, and where it all could head into. And feel free to drop in any questions within the chat box, and we would love to address them at end of the panel, a couple of them. So please drop in your questions in the chat box. Thank you. And let's start with a fun opener to get things rolling in. I would love for all the panelists to be on stage. Hello, all. I would love for you.
Hello.
Great. So happy to see all the brightest smiles on the screen at the very beginning of the summit. Love that. I would love for you all to introduce yourselves by sharing with us who you are, what you do, and let's start with one fun question. What's one HR tech tool you cannot live without right now, and why? Yeah, and there's no clockwise or anti-clockwise. Anyone who wanted to jump in first can dive in.
Good morning. I'll kick us off. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's great to be on this panel. It's great to be working with Hacking HR. My name is Felicia Blasberg, and I'm a global HR executive. And I would say right about now, one of my favorite tools to use is not necessarily a TA tool, but I do love the Grammarly tool for writing emails, writing candidate notes, helping with job descriptions. It really, really streamlines the process tremendously. So that's kind of my favorite tool right now, especially as a former writing professor. So thanks for having me today.
Love that. Thank you for joining us. And I see,
Okay, I
yes,
can go
yes,
next. Hi,
yes.
everyone. This is Sinem. So I'm also working on a global scale for the HR platform, overall HR technologies, and digital HR transformation. For the last 18 years, this is my has been my focus. And the fun question you had, Senna, about the which HR tool, I would say the HCM. I mean, the HCM, unfortunately, because for us, everything is there, the data is there, the information is there. So yeah, that's one thing that I wouldn't be able to do without. So
That's
thank you.
awesome.
Happy to be
Thank
here.
Thank you for being here. We'd love to host you all. And I see Precious and Steve both unmuted. So, yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Precious Brooks. I'm based in New York City, and I've worked in HR and talent acquisition leadership roles. And like Felicia, my favorite tool is not HR related specifically, it's Slack. So I love the ability to just have a lot of conversations, limit your inbox filling up, and resolve conversations quickly. And it's a great user-friendly tool. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Precious. Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Steve. I Chief People Officer here in Northwest Arkansas in the Bentonville, Fayetteville area. I work with a portfolio of companies, all in different industries, mainly in the consumer packaged goods business, so working with Walmart. My favorite HR tool right now is a tool called RightMatch AI, and it's an AI-powered recruiting assessment tool that I have discovered last year, and I am using it like crazy. I'm excited to talk about it throughout the panel today because it's a game changer for me personally.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all your introductions and the tool that you can't live without. And I would love to jump on with a couple of personalized questions that aligns with today's topic and also the panel, as well as the experience that you've gained with all the work of years, so that our audience can have a glimpse of how you handle things and how you tackle different kind of situations. And then we can jump on to the core, which would be the internal parts of this particular summit. And yeah, I would start with Steve as you're still unmute. So, what tech tool has made the biggest impact on your recruiting process and results?
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I'm gonna stick with RightMatch. It is a tool that, well, let me back up. My biggest frustration in our talent acquisition process, and I'm in a small company, but we hire quite a bit, was with the way the talent marketplace looks today. We're getting thousands of resumes, thousands of applications for roles, especially if the role is posted as hybrid or remote. And there's just no way that our TA tool or our HRIS system could do a good job of assessing those candidates. And there's no way I can do 1,000 phone screens. And so I tried to find a tool that would help me in that first step of the funnel process. After the original tool has told me who's not qualified for the role, and that's an easier assessment, let the algorithm, handle some of that. But once I'm down to 100 qualified people, it is helping me reduce bias. And because I have a natural bias when I see a resume or when I see a set of experiences, I have unintentional bias when I look at their experiences. It's helping me reduce that. It's helping me increase the number of candidates that I'm able to get a meaningful glimpse into, so that then I can come from 100 people down to a manageable number of 10 or 15 that are not only qualified, but have been assessed in an unbiased way. And then I can get on the phone with those folks. I have a shot at talking to 15 people. I don't have a shot at talking to 500 or 50 or even 25 on a good day. I'm an HR department of 1.5. And so that's where I've really benefited, is from a tool like RightMatch that is at that top level of the funnel as candidates are coming into my requisition process. It's helping me do the work of about 6 screeners, is essentially what it's doing.
Thank you, Steve. I think our audience are going to love that. And thank you for sharing those details. I will jump on to mine. So what's the biggest challenge companies face when trying to implement smarter hiring technologies at scale within the experience range that you have seen so far?
Perfect. Thank you, Sena. And I mean, I will actually link a little bit what Steve has said. I mean, for me, especially when you're looking at the challenges on a bigger scale, the main issue is not the technology itself. I mean, technology is there to enable, right? But the main issue has always been alignment. You might have, global policies, but then localized and regional compliance issues where something that works beautifully in one market, you might start getting resistant from another market for the same kind of tools or processes, right? So for me, it has always been alignment. I think what companies, the biggest challenge that companies need to overcome is that they need to ensure they have guiding principles. They really have an acknowledgement of the strategy that they are working against, so that they have a harmonized approach to what they would like to implement. So when I say harmonize the approach, I'm not talking about one type of process, only one process to work everywhere. No, I mean, it's about having those background of everything, having the good framework that you can start working and start acknowledging and aligning accordingly. So for me, the biggest challenge is always the alignment, and then the technology will follow you, will enable you, like Steve has given an example. It will make you, enable you to do things at a scale and more efficiently.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that if I may. I would go even one level deeper to what Sinam just said. It's also about getting alignment between your recruiters and so spot on, 100% agree. But then the next level of alignment is that alignment between recruiters and the hiring manager. I speak to a lot of recruiters on a daily basis, and oftentimes a recruiter can't even speak to the elements of the job, can't answer questions. I mean, a recruiter should be an extension of your hiring manager. It should be like speaking to a recruiter should be like speaking to a hiring manager, understanding the business, being able to speak to the business. That's a big part of what's missing. And technology can't always fix that. I think it's having a robust onboarding for your recruiters and making sure that there's a very strong partnership between the hiring manager and the recruiters. So again, I think technology is just one of those elements that supports your process. But Sinam says it is 100% correct. You need some of those foundational pieces first.
Thank you. Thank you, Nine, and thank you, Felicia, for answering that. And I would jump on to Precious. What are some of the biggest and best practices to incorporate AI tools into an existing workflow?
Thanks, Anne. And building off of what Sinem and Felicia already said, I mean, I think number one, when you're thinking through the appropriate AI tool, you're going to want to be able to define your goals. So as the recruiter is going to be bombarded thinking through candidate sourcing, automated screening, trying to enhance the candidate's engagement and experience, they need to be lock and step with the hiring manager. So when you're thinking through the appropriate tools, you kind of have to think, broader outside of just what's directly going to impact the HR team in a sense, but what's going to make the organization, I think, more successful. And then we're having this conversation across all industries. How can you balance your automation with human touch? So, I come from the global development space where, we're going to have very specific skill sets that we're looking for, similar to tech, similar to finance. But part of the selling point of an organization is going to be how, that touch and that connection you have with your candidates. So how far do you want to go along automation to save time, but you might lose some of that flavor and that connectivity that's going to be important to get your candidates to want to join the organization. The other thing is going to be, and I think I saw this already, there was a question to Steve about right match, thinking through ethical standards, and if you're in the US, some of that recruitment compliance, and I'm sure in other countries as well, you're gonna have to think about gender, race, sex. Like, I mean, there's a lot of the elements that come in. Can your recruitment platform, or linked with AI, do that without causing disparate impact that might get you into trouble down the line? And then finally, I think it's just making sure, and this gets to what Felicia was saying, recruiters and then probably the rest of the HR team are trained up on the systems that you're using. And so you can use it efficiently and practically, and it's going to just make, I think, everyone's lives easier in the long run. It's going to save time and efficient, and then everyone's going to kind of have that common understanding and ground to use these AI tools.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And now we have lastly Felicia. So I would love to get your take on how can organizations use technology to shift from CV-driven hiring to a skill-first approach.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Oh, the fun of technology. First and foremost, I think to execute a strong change management process with moving from CV-based to skills-based is working with your hiring managers and effectively training them. That's first and foremost. And again, technology plays a role in that, but you really need to get the buy-in from the hiring managers, because oftentimes hiring managers will just have, will be super focused or laser focused on, I just need somebody with this skill. And they're just accustomed to saying, I need this many years of experience and this type of this type of degree. So really working with your hiring managers on an effective change management approach is first and foremost. I think that I mentioned earlier, and I think that there was a question in the comments, what was my favorite technology that I'm using? Grammarly is one of those technologies. It's really easy to use, and it can help with rewriting your job descriptions, because that again is one of the first. You can't. This is the gap in the marketplace right now. You have these job descriptions. They say one thing, and they'll say something like, just as a simple example, this job is remote, and then when you go to read the job description, it's like, this job is in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm like, okay, well, that's not remote. You need somebody in Missouri. So there is that disconnect. So I think if you have a strong piece of technology that can identify some of those gaps for you, as well as help you rewrite job descriptions, I think that's a daunting task in itself, especially if you come from a large organization that has maybe thousands of job descriptions. So that would be, I would say that would be my first two steps to making that change.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you for saying that. And now I would love to zoom out a little bit and hear your quick thoughts on a couple of big picture themes. I would love to start with something simple or basic for everyone to understand from our participant crew. So here's a very simple throw. When a company is juggling several tools, what would be your first step for avoiding tech overload? I think this question is something that you hear a lot. Anyone could go first. I'm going to unmute myself. I'm going to mute myself. Sorry.
I would say, it's a great question, because I think all of us want to leverage technology every bit we can. The role is overwhelming if you can't. And there is this theory that you want to have the best in class of each part of your tech stack, but it becomes overwhelming when they don't all integrate seamlessly the way they tell you do in the demo call, right? They all say they integrate with everything, and then they don't. And so here's what I would say, and here's what I have done, and I'm anxious to hear what the other folks say. I have tried to pinpoint my biggest pain point in my process, and then try to find a technology that helps me with that, and try to leverage all of the other in-house technologies that are in my HRIS system to do everything else possible. Obviously, if there's a major gap in what my HRIS can do, I'll try to find a solution. But rather than try to find, and again, I'm not in a big organization and I've got 1.5 people working with me. So I need my HRIS to do most of the heavy lifting. And if there is a part that is most painful for me, I will go look for a tech solution that brings help in that one area. And for me, that was on the top end of the funnel assessments. Assessing the number of candidates I could assess for an open role is really important to me, to make sure I'm not pigeonholing or getting too narrow in my focus. I want to be able to assess as many qualified people as I can. That was my pain point, my biggest pain point. So I chose one technology to help me do that one pain point. And then once I feel really good about that, I'll maybe look at my next pain point. But I'm not in a position where I can take 6 tools at the same time. I can't handle it.
Yeah, I agree with Steve. I think in every organization, you have to do the very first step should be doing an audit of your process to figure out where you have the gap so that you can integrate different tools to help close that gap. But even in large organizations, I think there's not always a budget to do that, or there's not always resources to do that. So you have to be very, very clear on what your technology roadmap is going to be, and mapping it out over maybe 3 to 5 years. It might sound like a long time, but you can keep going back to it each time you get more and more, more and more comfortable with what you have in place. But you need to have the process, and you need to know, like, from a budgeting perspective, you need to bring in finance. I mean, Steve might be in a little bit of a different position, but looking at it from a broader scale, there's a lot of key stakeholders that you have to get involved. So just grabbing technology and praying to God that praying to the people upstairs that it all works and integrates seamlessly is only going to make the process worse. And so I agree with Steve. I think you really need to identify, where do I need to bring technology in, and focus on that, and then slowly integrate other systems.
And Felicia, I really liked the way that you actually spotted on. I fully agree with you, both you and Steve. And I will take a look at it from another perspective, because it is not only the tools. I mean, we can have multiple tools, right? But what is really important is to ensure, and I'm coming to Felicia's point, I think, is to ensure that they are actually working in a seamless way. So your overall ecosystem for your HR tools and your broader IT ecosystem needs to be talking to each other in a seamless way. So the data flow must be consistent and accurate, right? So first of all of your core data to be worked on in a good way. So for me, it's definitely about not the number of the tools, name of the tools, but what is really important is, as Steve said, what you need and how that is going to solve your problem, and then how it is going to sit in the rest of your ecosystem. So that is overall what we need to look at when we are looking at a new this could be, I mean, you might have the best ATS, but if everything is stopping when the offer is signed, no data is flowing, I mean, you are already started creating friction, right? So I think that is a important point, adding to Steve's and Felicia's point, that we also need to take a look in, I would say.
And just to add in, another point. So you can kind of find maybe some stop gaps. So I think budget's always going to be a major factor in HR systems, depending on the size of the organization and where you are in terms of scaling up and hiring or not. There might not be the desire to make that investment. So if you can find tools, I mean, Felicia, you talked about Grammarly, I think like Calendly or something like that. You may not be able to budget for some of these emerging AI tools right now that are going to feed into the back-end system, but where you can maybe give your TA team some reprieve it's worth looking into some of those smaller, low-hanging fruit options that are going to be temporary solutions.
Okay, thank you all for sharing that amazing nugget of insights to everyone. And I would love to quickly jump on to the next topic so that we could cover it all and squeeze it all within the panel. And the next one is what's the balance between automation and personalization? How do you scale without sounding robotic? It's a tricky question. Yeah.
I'm totally going to throw Steve under the bus. I would love to hear an answer from Steve, because I think something that you said earlier about Right Match was you get 500 candidates or applicants. You use the technology to bring it, to funnel it down further and further down so that you can come to the 15 people that you're actually going to speak to. So I would love to hear, again, not to throw you under the bus, but I would love to hear your opinion on that balance, because that to me that's very interesting. So I would love to hear from you on that.
No, bring it on, Felicia. I love it. Thank you. I'll tell you, this was a tough one for me because one of the things I love most about talent acquisition is getting to know people and finding the perfect role at the perfect time for the perfect person, like all the things. And so I'll just tell you two things that I do that make me that I have chosen to intentionally do to make sure that I'm doing what I can from keeping it personal, even though I'm leveraging technology. The first thing I do, which Right Match tool now offers, it didn't offer when I started working with them, but they're an incredible tool that takes feedback from users and makes improvements. I wanted to be able to record a video of myself thanking the candidate for participating in our process and for inviting them into the next step of the process. And so while I can't do 100 different versions of the video, although someday, probably soon with AI, I probably could, but I'll record a welcome message for every open role I have that talks about why we're leveraging Right Match and how we're leveraging Right Match. And it's just a personal way for them to hear and see me instead of just an email or a bot in a process. I'm not getting to talk to them individually, but they're getting to hear me and see me and know that there's a person, and I'm acknowledging that we're using AI and it's for good reason. I will tell you, I've had 2 candidates in the last 6 months preemptively opt out of our process because we were using an AI powered tool on the front end. And the sentiment was basically, I don't want to work for a company that doesn't put the person first and doesn't at least give me a phone conversation. In both instances, I reached out to that person directly and did an in-person interview on live, but on the phone, on Zoom, because I wanted to honor them and their courage to say something. But at the end of the day, after that call, I think I was able to convince them that, no, I understand your point, but what you don't understand without doing the process first is this is actually my best way of making sure that the right people get seen and heard for my role. I'm just using a tool to help me do the first 5 yards of the process. So I don't know if that answers it, Felicia, but that is a concern of the human of making it personalized to the candidate. A fundamental aspect of Right Match is that it's a video interview where the candidate is answering my questions that I've asked via video. They're answering them on their own time. They're able to share their screen. In fact, we want them to share their screen if they have examples that they can share from their portfolio. And then I also love the fact that we have an assessment option where a candidate can say that they can code in Python and they can talk about that they can code in Python, but then we ask them to write a line of code in Python sharing their screen. And it goes back to the previous question of how do you move from CV hiring to skills assessment hiring. This is another way that we've included. We're actually able to confirm you can do the task, you can do the skill prior to me having any hiring manager spend time on the phone talking with someone. It's just another step in the assessment process. But you're right, I do try to make it as personal as I can, acknowledging that I'm leveraging technology because I need to make sure that I reduce my own personal bias and that I make sure that the algorithm doesn't weed out people erroneously without looking at my specific job requirements and my specific assessment factors.
Thank you, Steve. And I really love this conversation. It was amazing. And I would quickly jump on to the next one, which is also one of my favorites. So here is the next one. What skills or mindsets will recruiters themselves need to thrive in the next 5 years with all this tech and the implementations that's happening?
I would say that, recruiters, you're going to have a specific type of mindset, but I don't know how many non-talent acquisition or HR professionals are on this call, but hopefully you'll get leadership or finance or tech colleagues being advocates for recruiters. We all see on LinkedIn, recruiters can get a lot of hate, and oftentimes people just don't understand what goes on in the back end. So of course, for recruiters, you're going to want to get more agile, probably like teach yourself some of these tools. There's like a Google third-party add-on tool called Superhuman. So you can add to your Gmail or your Outlook that can kind of help craft responses and automate some of that work. So you can respond probably to candidate inquiries, or maybe even let people know you're not moving forward, et cetera, more quickly. So there's going to be a lot of learning on that end. But I would also advocate for others within the organization to stand up for the recruiters and say, they're doing their best. It's not recruiter incompetence or just being slow or something like that. There really is a high volume of applications, and there's a lot of steps that go into the process to remain compliant.
I fully agree, Precious. I think you started with a very good point there, and I would add on to it, because for me, the skills, the competencies, and the recruiters should be looking at is not AI or technology. No, I think it is more the soft skills, which are now power skills, right? So negotiation skills, leadership skills, strategic thinking, analytical thinking. So they need to have this business acumen. And back to what Felicia and Steve said, I think it's about understanding what really business is going, where business is going, being able to connect the dots in that sense. Those are the competency skills that we would start looking overall in the recruiters. And I think we need to take good care of our talent acquisitions teams. I fully agree with that, because they are on the front line. And AI, I'm hoping that with the technology, at this speed, those kind of repetitive tasks. Today we have Olivia, Tyra, 8 scored, hard score, 8 falls, hard score. So the transactional activities hopefully are going away a little bit with technology for the recruiters, but what is left is what is more important: building the relationship with candidates, right? The assessments, as Steve said. I think those are the skills that we need to invest in our recruiters.
Yeah, and I would also just add, it's maybe not necessarily a skill, but it goes back to the recruiters being part of the process. I think it was Precious who mentioned that they're on the front line. So if you're implementing a new technology, you have to have recruiters involved in the process. It's, it can't be just, maybe your IT team doing it, or, it has to be cross-functional across HR, because every function within HR at one point might touch some type of TA tech tool. So I think it's important so maybe project management might be a skill, so that they can lead the project of implementation of a new tool. So I think involving them will also be able to teach them the tool along the way. So I think, again, not necessarily a skill, but probably more of a best practice.
Thank you, everyone. I see that there are a couple of questions in the comment box, so I would love to address them. So I would specify two questions, and anyone can take one of them and just provide your perspectives to them. So, what AI sourcing tools do you recommend by Cheryl? And there is another question that's up to yourself, which is how do you protect your employer brand when there are so many recruiter challenges? Followed up by the previous conversation. Oh, I see a lot of questions coming in as well. Yeah, anyone could take up the question.
I'm going to take the employer brand question because it's near and dear to my heart. And I don't think companies out there understand the impact of their brand that their candidate experience is creating. It's employer brand, it's, consumer buying habits. I'm somebody who I haven't been to Macy's since 1997, and there's a reason I don't go to Macy's. So I'm one of those people who, like, when I have a bad experience, I really shy away from that brand, and that affects my consumer buying habits. So I'm not going to go to Macy's. I'm going to go to one of their competitors. It also impacts, I don't think companies realize that a candidate one day might be your vendor, and they might be in a position where they might be choosing the vendor that you now work that your company represents. If that makes sense in my head, but maybe I didn't articulate it very clearly. But I think there's a lot happening through the candidate experience that's impacting employer brand. And I don't think companies are thinking about the candidate experience as much as they should be. I'm going to get off my soapbox there because I could have a whole summit just on the candidate experience. And I'll let my dear colleagues answer more about the AI tools.
Yeah, just improvising a little bit on the question, which follows up with the next one. What are the best AI tools and skills should be learned by every HR fresher? Mm.
Maybe I can jump on a little bit because there was also a question on the AI tools as well. So lately, very lately, Workday has acquired Paradox, which is intelligent recruitment system that works with Olivia. Maybe some of the participants have already worked with Olivia. Workday is doing a lot in that domain. They had acquired Hired, Scored in the past. But still, where we are, I think, having challenges when implementing this kind of AI tools is we are hitting compliance. We are hitting the button for fitting in the overall process, and we are hitting the button of how people will use it. So is it only HR, or is it, the rest of the hiring managers, leadership team, and how they are going to engage with those tools, right? So I think there are many nice tools out there already, and many more are actually coming. But I think I will go back to the discussion points that we had in the beginning of the session. What is really important is what is the problem that you are trying to solve with those tools. Was there another question? Sorry, I don't know if I think I did the one on the AI tools from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinem.
I'll just follow up on what Sinem said just quickly. I think because this is a newer landscape, actually what I recommend is joining some of these HR communities. I'm a member of Troop HR, for example, but there's going to be hundreds of HR communities out there where you're constantly having these conversations and you're going to get a recommendation. It's going to have to be tailored to your specific organization and context. But I will put in a plug for making sure, because oftentimes being in talent acquisition or in HR can feel like you are in a vacuum and you're alone. But thousands of people are grappling with these issues and having these conversations on a daily basis. So syncing up, I think is going to at least help you start to get to the solution and the problem you're trying to solve.
Thank you, Precious. That's amazing. And I would love for this conversation to go on for a little longer to grab that little questions from our comments box and address each of them. But we are right at time, so I hope our panelists can answer them private and let them know about those details. But before I could wrap up, I would love to run a very quick rapid fire style of round where I would love your 2 cents for all our participants who are here right now within our chat box so that it's helpful for them. Please do share with us a tactic we can all try tomorrow to use hiring tech without losing the human touch. Anything that comes to your mind, let it be a word or a liner, one liner.
Well, tech should remove friction in the process, not the human connection. That's from my perspective.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh my
I
God,
would
I'm
go
totally
with.
stealing that. I mean, that's amazing. It's so true. Technology should be seamless. It should make teams work better together, but still have that human connection and that collaboration. So I love that. I echo. I can't beat that. Not that it's a competition, but I can't beat that.
My
Thank
word, I
you.
think, would be video. The more that they can see and hear your passion, whether it's a personalized message or a generic message, I just think leveraging the power of video is really important. Email can't convey passion.
Totally agree with that. Yes. Yeah.
It's hard to go to go last. I mean, I would say, I mean, it's kind of summarizing what's been said across the board, thinking through the end result of what you're trying to achieve as you select your tool. So if it's going to be kind of a short-term stopgap tool you implement, or it's going to be part of like an enterprise resource planning system that's going to be rolled out. So it's going to take some longer term thinking. You're going to want to kind of be strategic as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Precious. And yeah, I would again love to thank you all so much, Steve, Sinem, Precious, Felicia. This was a high value and super fun panel, and I have enjoyed it, and I see that you've enjoyed it. And also, there are a lot of comments which also says that people did enjoy a lot as well. So, thank you all again. To everyone tuning in, to all our registrants, please do take a moment, stretch a little bit, go grab a sip of water or coffee if you're a coffee person, and we will be back shortly with our next session. And it's going to be in the best hands of Lauren. So, yeah, until then, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in. If this is your first session of the day or the week, welcome to your first session at the Talent Strategy and Acquisition Summit. If you've been here, welcome back. My name is Lauren Lefkowitz. I will be our host and moderator for this session, Structuring Onboarding to Boost Retention and Performance. I am an executive coach and fractional chief HR officer. I've got 25 years of HR experience, and onboarding is one of my favorite topics to talk about because of what a difference it makes in how our employees experience their time with us. I would love and then start the conversation. Welcome in, panelists. So happy to have you here. I will ask you to put yourselves on mute when you're not talking, which you've all done, just so we don't have any background noise. And let's start with introductions, and we'll just do left to right on the top and left to right on the bottom row. I'd love for you to share with us who you are, where you work, where in the world you are, and why this topic is interesting to you. So go ahead, Brandy, and get us started.
Oh, wow. I've never gone first. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Brandy Fennell. I am originally from New York, but I am currently in the Washington, D.C. metro area. We like to call it the DMV. And my career has really just always been about people, helping them grow, navigate change, and feel a sense of belonging at work. Right. And so with my background in IO psychology and leadership development, I think that the way we bring people into an organization kind of sets the stage for everything that follows. And so that's why I'm here today, and I'm happy to be part of this conversation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Bivens. I am from Louisville, Kentucky, and I am 20 years into the HR field, and onboarding has always been my favorite topic. Again, kind of echoing what Brandy said, it's the start of, I guess, how you start your career in a particular organization. First impressions are very important. So again, I feel like that's that welcome is really how you begin your career and start building those relationships. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you.
Hi, all. I'm Natalie Morgan. I am the Senior Director of People at CareerPlug, which is a hiring and retention software company for small businesses. We are a 100% remote company in the US, so I am in a very small town in Wisconsin, which is also where I'm from. If you're familiar with Door County, Wisconsin, I live by the lake up here. And I'll echo the panelists. I love talking about onboarding. I think it's a time where you get to fulfill the promises you made in the hiring process and really set the tone for the entire employee life cycle. And I love the connection of this panel because onboarding and retention go hand in hand. So really excited for this conversation.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now? Okay, guys. My name is Aaron Hoosier. I'm crazy about all things HR. I've been in this business for a while now. One of the things that I love about onboarding is the fact that it does set the tone, but really and truthfully, the conversation I'm here today to have is to definitively say that onboarding isn't filling out paperwork. It's not a 90-day process. It's a year-long activity where you're storming and norming and you're getting them connected and you're making sure that the performance piece and the retention piece is there, because I got to tell you, things are changing. We've got Generation Alpha coming. I don't even care about Gen Z right now. They're here. We're dealing with it. But the Generation Alpha is going to be the people that really set the tone and change radically how we engage. And that's coming down the pike within the next 10 to 15 years. And we got to get ready for it, or we're all going to be kind of in a pickle.
Thank you so much for those really hearty introductions. I'm so excited about this conversation. So I want to start with a really sort of down to the detail, nitty gritty kind of question, and then we'll broaden from there. But the first question I have for you all is, if you think about your own onboarding experiences or something that you've delivered in onboarding, that's like a very specific thing that's been an absolute game changer. You would never not do it again. You deliver it everywhere you go. What is that? And when you're ready to answer, just come off mute, pay attention to each other's mute buttons so that everybody gets a chance.
Hey, this is my favorite thing that I've done most recently here at the museum. I'm at the Speed Art Museum. Is I call it Speed 101, and it's actually half-day training, and it's opportunity for every department within the museum to come in about 10, 15 minutes and talk about their department and share with all the staff how their roles kind of, interact with each other. Sometimes in mission-driven work, it may be hard to connect your function to the overall mission of the museum. And for me, as I designed this training or this session, it was what I would have loved to have had when I started, because it's like, I was new to museums. So what is a curator exactly? What are preps? Like, what does that mean? What are these different roles within museums? And, it's been fun. It's been educational. It goes by so fast, but every department comes in and they share their experience, or they share their role. And each new hire has an opportunity to ask questions, which is why I learn something every time. I give them a little history about our museum. We're the largest museum in the state of Kentucky. So, there's a lot of history involved there. We'll be 100 years old in 27. So it's just been really fun to have everyone come in and just talk about their departments. And, depending on the questions, there's always a different take. Some of our new hires could be someone who are art majors or art history majors. So their questions to the curatorial team are different. But it is interesting to see how, we have people who come in as, in our protection services team, they may not understand how their role, securing the art or walking through our galleries, ties in with our learning and engagement team, or how that impacts our private events that we have here at the museum. So it's just been amazing. And like I said, it's been really fun, and I've gotten amazing feedback. Like, wow, this is great. Now I kind of understand what everyone does. It helps them as they, maybe get questions or, get inquiries about certain things. They feel like they can speak to it. So it's kind of it's not overwhelming. I think that's another thing I didn't want it to be, spending a whole day in each department, but just a quick snippet, just enough to get an understanding about it. So to me, I feel like that's been a game changer, onboarding our staff, just giving them that really quick overall understanding, because I didn't realize what happened behind the curtain at a museum. You go to the museum downstairs and you see the beautiful art and the exhibitions, but you don't realize that in the upper levels and sometimes lower levels, there's this whole other world happening. And it's been really fun to see everyone learn and grow. And even, the departments, they talk about how it's really interesting, and to have that opportunity to really share the passion that they have for their work, and how that how their roles and how their departments, feed into the mission that we have for the museum.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I'm like so interested to like attend one of those sessions because I'm like, I want to know how a museum works too. And I love that idea. We do something similar at Career Plug as far as like giving department intros, but we don't do it all in like a truncated half day. And I really like that all together. So thank you for sharing. And it kind of reminds me, this is an AI panel, but we're like talking about AI so much, and AI is useful with context, and like that's true because humans are like work better with context, and that's such a big part of onboarding. So what you're doing is giving people context for how your company works. And I think about that in our onboarding too. Something that we started doing a couple years ago that I think has had a lot of success is that no matter what department people are joining at Career Plug, the first 2 weeks of training is essentially the same. We put them through our like tier 1 support training. So we're a software company, and we were finding with the like abbreviated trainings we were giving other departments, or like engineers want to go code right away. So they were maybe skipping some of the front end. Here's how the product works. Here's how our clients actually interact with it. Here's their personas in the industry, the stuff that our frontline people who are answering the phones knew really well. They were then coming back a year later and being like, wait, that's how that works? I wish I knew that. So we changed our whole onboarding, and our support team runs onboarding for the first 2 weeks. So they pull in different agents to do the training. They go through it like they're about to be a tier 1 agent, and then we send people off to their own departments, and actual tier 1 agents stay in training for a couple more weeks to do the deep dive of that. But I think while we always have people who are like, I just want to like get into my marketing or get into my sales role, once they're in those roles, they've really appreciated having that full context of the product and our clients. So it's certainly something that I'm going to try to keep us doing in the future as well.
And both of you gave such great answers. I think I'm going to do a combination and share both a personal game-changing experience and something I designed because it was heavily influenced by that experience. So one of the game-changing moments for me came early in my career when a leader didn't just walk me through systems and policies, but actually took the time to share the story of the organization and how my role connected to something bigger, right? That gave me a sense of belonging and purpose from day one. And so later on, when I got to be the person who was kind of structuring and leading onboarding, I carried that insight into designing an onboarding framework that stretched across the first year. So instead of stopping at orientation, we built a 30, 90, and 180-day check-ins that were focused on quality of hire, engagement, and performance. And that approach not only made employees feel supported, but it also helped leaders see onboarding as more of a strategic lever rather than just a compliance exercise. And so for me, the game changer is always the same. It's whether it's a personal story or a formal framework, onboarding works best when it connects people to meaning and then sustains support well beyond someone's first week or 30 days.
Absolutely. And what I think changed my perception of onboarding is that a few years back, I had the opportunity to go through a culture boot camp by Zappos, and I got to look at onboarding done pretty well. There's still room for improvement. I get it. I don't think anybody does it perfectly. That's the beautiful thing about onboarding. It changes, it constantly evolves. One of the things, though, that I took away from that is understanding the culture for people, the reason why, everything that you guys have just said. And I kind of expand this more, and every organization that I'm with, I literally changed their perception of what onboarding is, because for me, onboarding doesn't end at the 90 or the whatever mark that we have. Onboarding ends when that person is completely embedded and performing, and sometimes that's a year, Sometimes that's less. But one of the good takeaways that I do utilize, and I'm hoping that I'm giving a tool here, is that I do something called a roadmap to success. When I'm sitting there and I'm actually going through a process and we know that we have a new hire coming in, depending on an organization, some people may have it, some people may not. But the way you implement this is you sit down with the hiring manager and you say, okay, this is going to be your employee. Let's talk about all the key metrics that they need to hit. Let's talk about all the key skills that they need to have. Let's talk about all the tools that they need to do to be able to do that job correctly. And what timeframes do you need them to do and hit these marks? And then you sit down and you work out a matrix on this is what your training is going to look like. This is what your first 30-day, 90-day, 180 days. But I do it by months. First month, second month, third month. And then all of a sudden, by the time they're at their year evaluation, there's no surprises. By that year evaluation, they either know they've got it or they know where they're lacking. And it's an ongoing conversation. And then we kind of transition into the other, funner things. But also, too, one of the pushbacks that I've gotten, and I want to give this to y'all, is that, well, does that mean that we don't hold them accountable for this whole time they're onboarding? No, you hold them accountable because we're all adults here and we all have to hit our matrix. We all have to hit our accountabilities. But also, too, you've given them all the tools. You've contacted them. You've talked to them. It's an ongoing monthly thing where you go and you talk to your employee once a month and you sit down here. This is what you're doing great. This is where we need to improve. But more importantly, what do you feel? How do you feel that you're hitting this mark? And that's a game changer for people.
Thank you so much. Aaron, it's like I've paid you to lead us into the next question. When we think about onboarding, and Jessica, I think it was you, and forgive me if it wasn't, who said onboarding isn't the paperwork, right? That's a task, right? So if you think about the life cycle of an employee from candidate applying for the job to termination for whatever reason, when does onboarding actually begin? And when does it end and turn into you're one of us now, your onboarding is complete? And what do you do to kick off that engagement, to make it feel like a welcoming, a place of belonging, a place where people feel like they want to come here because they've been onboarded right?
So I'm going to jump in real quick because I actually want to hear what everybody else has to say. Real quick, I feel onboarding starts from the time that the hiring manager says, I need to fill a position. And then we go from there because they're a critical piece in that onboarding process. But then also, too, the talent engagement from the person that may get the job or may not get the job, because who's to say they're not going to get the next job they apply for? I mean, there's a lot of nuances there, but I think that it starts at the very foundation of we need to fill this position. And then, obviously communication works well, but I really want to hear what the rest of the panel has to say about some of their best practices.
I guess I'll go. But yeah, I'm right there with you, Aaron. Onboarding definitely begins well before day one, right? It's in the hiring process. Every interaction a candidate has shapes their perception of the organization. So onboarding really starts with how you communicate, how transparent you are, how you set those expectations from the beginning. And then in terms of when it ends, it shouldn't be really confined to orientation, or as we've been saying this whole time, first week, first 30 days, 90 days, etc. Research shows that it actually takes 6 to 12 months for someone to truly kind of ramp up to productivity. So I really see onboarding as a first year journey. And it's more than, checklists. It's about acclimating, building connections, being kind of socialized and culturalized into the organization, right? And giving people confidence in their role. To kick things off in a meaningful way, what I found like small but intentional touches, like a matter that they've kind of really mattered most. Like, so a personal welcome message from the leader of the organization, or the department, or both, right? Having kind of like a peer buddy who reaches out before day one, even to just like ensure technology and tools are set up, so the new hire knows what to expect. I think those kind of early signs kind of communicate, you belong here, we're ready for you, because there's nothing worse than, it's your first day and you don't have a computer yet and you don't have an email yet. And like, oh yeah, we were going to do that, but this person's on vacation, or people act surprised like they didn't know you were starting, right? So I really think that kind of sets the tone for everything that follows.
Yeah, I can hop in. I mean, I'll echo Brandy and Aaron as far as when onboarding starts, hiring. I think onboarding a lot is, it's like a mindset, right? Of how can we like embed that onboarding mindset to be consistent across our employee life cycle? Because there's always more room for context, connection, belonging, and having that consistent message throughout makes a huge difference. And I would agree with that, like 6 months to a year thing. A lot of the businesses that I talk to in my role are actually like very small business, like retail, restaurant organizations. So we narrow a little bit more on the first 90 days because turnover in the first 90 days for restaurant or retail can be like 50% or above, right? So really tackling like, how do you fix that early turnover problem for those industries? And a lot of what I think about that is missing in some industries is that connection, that culture piece, that Jessica, you mentioned like the telling of your story, right? Where maybe in the tech world, maybe that's more obvious to me, but is something we can embed more throughout all organizations. To Jessica, you telling the story, we have our founder sit down with new hires in the first couple of weeks and tell like how you thought of the business, and classic started in his apartment story, right? And kind of give that context for why he wanted to do what we've done and connect people in that way. I sit down with all new hires first thing on like Monday morning and talk through our core values and give really specific like behavioral examples of like, okay, here's what being kind means, here's what keep growing means, and here are the programs to support that. So, and layering that context throughout their onboarding. Something else that I think helps at least us is 3 or 4 months in, we have we call it a pluggy palooza, career plug, we're pluggies. So we bring everyone who's hired in that time, and I bring them together and I give them all these like cultural and perks and like tip reminders, like things that we've heard over time that just got lost in onboarding, or there's just so much information at once. We bring everyone together and like, here are some FAQs we hear at this point or got missed. Here's a resource. Did you know you had this? Then we do a little like game or quiz and have a Q&A session so everyone can hear each other's questions. And I think that's been a good like group onboarding touch point for us. Again, usually like 3 to 4 months in, we'll do that. But I guess I just want to emphasize that I agree with onboarding is so much more than like the paperwork, and the underutilized part of onboarding to me is that connection, that culture, the values piece. How do you lead with that, and how do you keep that going? Because that's when people stay, right? They feel like they belong at your organization.
Last but not least, I do want to, I don't want to repeat what everyone says because I agree with every single thing. I was going to actually say a lot of the things that were said. So I was like, okay, now I have to think of something else. But I love your idea, by the way, Natalie. I love that, bringing everyone back together, that with new hires, be, considering sometimes they don't always have the same orientation session maybe. And it's kind of like, to have a newbie or someone else that kind of understands that you're new to the organization. I think it's great. Something I've always shared with new hires, even if they're hourly positions, management, director positions, is building relationships within the department and or with your colleagues. The first thing I always do for myself personally, starting out a new position, is meet with everyone, meet with all the directors, all the managers, quick session. It's not so much about the work, but let me get to know you. Let's get to know each other. Let's build a rapport. To me, I feel like that's the beginning of building those relationships. And I suggest that to everyone. It's like, hey, schedule time with all these people. Like, your role interacts with these particular positions first. Have set aside a time, schedule that time. So it's like, you're not twiddling your thumbs as a new hire, like, okay, I don't know how to do my job yet, so what am I going to be doing those first couple of days? So it's like, you're going to be meeting with the different directors, and you're going to understand how your role interacts with them. Or for me as an HR person, I'm like, how can I help you? Like, what's going on in your department? What are some of your, who are your A players, who are the C players who that we're going to need to work on? Like, what's ahead, and what do let's set a cadence for our meetings. Let's set a cadence for when you and I have our one-on-one sessions together as a HR and manager or director. But I really do think it's important to build those relationships. So something I'd like to suggest managers do is have set aside lunchtime on that first day or second day or so to have just that time, a welcome lunch with their team, and just laugh and have a good time. Be away from the office, but just have an opportunity to get to know your person. And, I think, again, that adds to that sense of belonging and welcome. The worst thing is to come to your workplace. And again, like Brandy said, you don't have a computer and you don't have an email, or you come and they don't know you're coming, and like, oh, you start today, and, all of that kind of stuff. It's, if you have swag, have that on their desk, have some type of welcome, have the minimum supplies on their desk. All the little things, they matter so much. Everyone remembers their worst first day, but people also remember their best first day, and I think that's important.
I just want to pause to acknowledge that nobody said, fun fact icebreakers, 2 truths and a lie. We are not in that era of onboarding and welcoming anymore. So thank you all for knowing that. And what I'm hearing is like such a quality of like breadth of understanding the organization you're coming into, depth of getting to know the organization, the job, the people that you'll be interacting with, because whether you're in person or on a Zoom or Teams screen, you don't want to be looking at strangers for the first several years of your career with that organization. One of the challenges I think we all run into as HR professionals is we have a plan. We have a beautiful plan. We're ready to implement. We're ready to be partnered to the hiring manager. And as soon as that person comes in for their first day or their first week, the manager is focused on speed to productivity. Yep, I put together this onboarding plan, or you put together this onboarding plan, but I got to get them to work. I've been waiting all this time to take this work off my plate. So how do you balance the hiring manager or the hiring team's desire to just get the work done with the actual high quality onboarding?
I think, I'm sorry, Brandy, everyone unmuted at once, but what I empathize with this a lot. And recently what's helped is because I have some more data about what happens when we have skipped that onboarding. So like I said, we have everyone go through these initial 2 weeks. And certainly you're talking to your department and your manager during that time, but you're not really focused on starting to get on demos if you're a salesperson, right? You're learning the product. And that's tough when you got quotas to meet. And look, I want business to do well too, right? We're all on the same team. But what I was able to see is when we had made a few exceptions to this rule over the past couple of years, and every exception, they either left the organization or they came to me when we were getting onboarding feedback. It's like, yeah, I actually really wish, we hadn't skipped that, even if it was that employee because they wanted to start a different time or something, saying it. Every single one came back. So what I was able to do is go to the executive team and be like, here's the data about this. I'm going to hold the line. Can you guys help me hold the line on, like, this is what is being, this was actually helping people get onboarded and be more productive later on. So if you're able to find some of that data to make your business case, I think it helps hiring managers to, like, look at the long term, right, rather than just that short term productivity gain.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. I think, and like you said, I completely can understand a manager's perspective, right? And I've been one of those managers when you're under pressure, the instinct is to just want new hires up and running quickly as possible, and you don't care about all the other things, all the nice to have kind of stuff in your mind, right? But what I know, just from IO psychology is that performance is not just about knowledge of task. It's about confidence, clarity, and what we've all been saying, belonging. So if those aren't in place, then productivity may come fast, but it won't be sustainable, right? That's when you see burnout, disengagement, and even turnover, which ends up costing far more than an actual thoughtful onboarding experience, right? So that's something I will emphasize to a hiring manager. And I think the real balance is in sequencing. Right. So I encourage managers to identify, a few early quick wins that help new hires feel capable, and useful right away. Right. Things like, structured shadowing, some bite-sized task, or just some achievable goals within those first 30 days or so that kind of satisfies the desire for immediate productivity. But alongside that, you can still build in, the deeper layers of onboarding with things like mentorship and team connection and cultural integration, right? And I think the key point is, employees are given both the clarity to contribute and the support to connect, then their ramp up actually accelerates, right? They don't just get work done, they get it done well and are then more likely to stay. And so when I share that perspective with managers, it helps them see onboarding not as a delay, but as an actual investment in higher quality and longer lasting performance.
I was actually going to say exactly what Brandy said, maybe not as eloquently, but I was going to share that, and the data is important too. I agree with that as well, Natalie. But in my mind, I'm thinking if you can get managers on board with your onboarding process, get them to see the value in it, participate in it. Hey, how about you come through this session so you can understand what's involved in this process and how it can possibly help your staff member integrate quicker into the organization, feel a part of the team. I think those building relationships are so important. It makes it easier for a new hire to ask questions or maybe know who to go to for certain things. And I think that in itself is also going to, contribute to the productivity and the success in that role. We've always talked about 30, 60, 90. We talked about those types of things. But, in my interviews, I've always asked, what's my priority? What are the priorities in this role? So you may have a manager who's like, I got to get this thing done. Okay, well then let that thing be maybe what you begin with in terms of onboarding that person into the role so that, they're not trying to learn everything at one time. It's like, okay, here's this thing we're going to be working on first, here's the other aspects of your role, but, focusing on this thing, this priority, as well as doing the onboarding, to me seems like it would make it, a smoother transition into the other work. I don't have to try to remember everybody's name. I don't have to remember every aspect, but I'm working on this thing because it is a priority for the team. So right out of the gate, I feel like I'm contributing to this department immediately. I'm doing this major project. We're all working together. This is fun, and so it's like, to me, it's twofold. The department's meeting a goal, the productivity or whatever it is that they need to do is happening. And the employee still being onboarded. I know that's not always, applicable in every role. You have some manufacturing roles, for example, where they're like, hey, we got to get this person on the floor, but it's like, do you want this person on the floor messing up, making safety, having safety issues? Those errors in that time to make those corrections are more costly than getting this person onboarded and into all the training, like they, getting that executive leadership support and backing. It's like, no, this isn't optional. this is just what it is, if it means that there's going to be, a need for the rest of the team to pick up some things until this new hire comes on fully on board, then that's what it has to be, so that, when we get this person out there, that they are ready to go and can contribute and, knows what they're doing and feel comfortable doing it. And there's no safety concerns or, they leave because they're overwhelmed because they got put on the floor or put it in a position before they actually fully felt comfortable and really understood their role.
No, absolutely, guys. I mean, and just to kind of piggyback on what y'all are already saying is that if the people out there listening don't take anything else away from this, I need you all to understand that we can't be the gatekeepers of the onboarding process. There's a part that everyone plays in it, but also too, you got to have support at the senior executive end of story. If they are not supporting the fact that this is a non-negotiable, you're always going to have exceptions. So that push-pull relationship becomes a little harder to manage. And sometimes, unfortunately, as Natalie has pointed out or hinted to, I think she did a good job. You got to let them kind of fall a little bit on, to show and be able to produce the documents that say, okay, look, we've tried it your way, and this is the results that have happened. So let's look at a different approach. And then it is all about holding the line, saying, okay, is this a non-negotiable? And does this make sense for the organization? And sometimes I get it. In a perfect world, things work smoothly, everything's going smashingly well. And there's not a single manager out there that wants their person to skip the onboarding process. But sometimes you have to look at them and say, you've had this position unfilled for 6 months. You can survive another 14 days. It's not a fun conversation to have, but we're not here to be people's friends. We're here to get things done and to do our job and to make sure that people are empowered to do their job. And sometimes you do have to be the bad guy. It's okay.
Thank you. We're already nearing the end of our conversation, which is always shocking to me because we could talk about this the whole day. In our last 5 minutes, if we could talk about the manager's responsibility in the onboarding process. So we've talked a lot about what we can do and what we can build and getting that executive buy-in. And we've had some really quality stuff in that, straight to productivity piece. But in an ideal world, which we can build in our organizations, in an ideal world of onboarding, we've got the sort of warmth and organization and depth of introduction to the company or organization we're working for. The work of the work, though, is on the manager and their employees. So if that experience is vastly different, they've loved their HR or people operations onboarding, but then they get into the meat of the work and they're like, I don't know anything. I haven't gotten any training. We don't want that. So in our last couple of minutes, can you share how do you engage the manager on their part and have them build an onboarding plan for the specifics of the job?
So I'm going to jump right in because I've already hinted how I handle this. I get them to give me a document that tells them exactly what their roles are, what they're going to be training their people on, and what that looks like. And here's the thing. The beautiful thing is they sign off on it. They agreed to it. This is what they said they were going to do. This was actually their plan. This isn't something that Aaron Hoosier decided for them. It's something that they sat down and they managed to write down and say, okay, this is what it looks like, and this is what I need them to do. And then they also provided the steps to get the people there. That's the best way. I've tried it every other way, and I've failed flat on my face. This little roadmap to success, I call it, is the best tool that I've figured out. However, I'm excited to hear other people's take on this.
I'm probably going to borrow some of that, Aaron, because I really like how you are approaching that. I think we probably do some kind of version or are working towards that. But something that I do think helps, we call it like an onboarding committee. So, right, we have the people team, we have the ops team, we have someone from the support team because they're running first onboarding, and then the hiring manager in their own committee and channel together. So everyone knows what's going on early on. We can do the plan long term. So it is really expected to be a group approach to onboarding. And then beyond that, we work with the manager directly on what Erin is saying. Okay, but like, what are the other things they need to be trained on? What is the plan, at least for the first month, first 6 weeks? But I appreciate you sharing, Erin, because I am going to take some of that back to our organization.
I agree with all of that. And I was going to say that have a plan and stick to it. I feel like that's the manager's role. Stick to it. And my role is to make sure that they do that. You know, when you send out the new hire surveys, if you do those, I think if you don't, you should, you know, those onboarding surveys, and have those sent out periodically and follow up with the manager as you get the feedback as well. You know, asking the right questions in those surveys is important to make sure that you're following up with the manager so that they do have they do know, hey, this person's still feeling this, or here's some areas of improvement that I think I can see with your team or whatever it is. But I think, you know, having that plan, a detailed plan, you know, as much as possible, in involving other departments to do that, because, you know, the manager's role is important role, but it's also important that that manager involve the other team as well, but then, you know, just involve other departments if that's needed. Again, if the person needs training on how to submit invoices, then they need to, you know, the manager needs to schedule that finance training with them, with the finance team or whatever that is. But just accountability, holding everyone accountable, and the manager do that, and me and HR help them do that as much. You know, if I need to nudge someone to follow up or whatever, then that's my role to do that. But yeah, I think that's part of the bigger thing. The plan is just so important, and then just that follows through on it.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. And so I'm going to try to not repeat what's already been said. But yes, definitely it's good to have a plan. And something that I always just remind leaders that onboarding is not an HR thing, right? It's a leadership responsibility. And, you know, two of the biggest predictors of whether a new hire stays and thrives at an organization is role clarity and social integration. And both of those hinge on the manager, right? So it's the manager's responsibility to translate the organization's mission into the day-to-day reality of the person's role, what success looks like, who the key partners are, you know, how do we do things here? And, you know, and to really get that team member to feel like they belong. So having that accountability, with whether it's a plan on paper or what I've done is whenever, you know, restructured or redesigned an onboarding program, I've had, you know, meetings with all hiring managers and all leaders in the organization, and also have one-on-one conversations with them to make sure that the point is really driven home, that it's not enough. You know, I'm not just going to hand you a checklist and say, hey, make sure you do this, and I'm going to hope for the best. You know, I'm going to actually build in structured checkpoints in those first 30, 60, 90 days, et cetera, that require the manager to sit down with the employee, talk about goals, give them feedback, and talk about development, how they're acclimating, right? How they're socializing into the organization. That way you can measure progress and spot challenges early, and then reinforce the culture, right? Reinforce the proper things. And I'll add this, you know, managers are much more willing partners when they see that onboarding isn't just extra work for them. You know, when they really look at it like a leadership tool, you know, and they understand that investing in onboarding means less rework for them and less turnover and faster results for their team, they actually lean into it. So I think it's just all about shifting the narrative and, you know, making it's not something that they have to comply with. It's actually something that's, you know, to their benefit in the end.
Thank you so much. This was such a rich panel, and we didn't even get to what our audience was talking about. This was one of the most active chats I've ever seen while I've been moderating a panel. So panelists, please go look at that chat afterwards. And for those of you who've been watching today, connect with these panelists, connect with me, connect with each other. Your community is this community. Thank you all so much for being here. Our next panel will be integrating internal mobility and succession into talent acquisition, starting in just 2 minutes. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of this day you're enjoying on your time zones as you are listening in or watching us now, or you enjoy the recording later on. It's a joy to be right in the middle of day 2 of our Talent Strategy and Acquisition Summit, and we have about 40 minutes ahead of us to talk about integrating internal mobility and succession into talent acquisition. It's a wonderful topic, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers. I will ask Jessa to bring them on the screen. So we already see who is in their Zoom box waiting to share generously their insights. Just a very quick reminder and encouragement to everybody in the audience. Do consider this conversation as much yours as it is our panelists. Wherever you have a story, a question, an opinion, your own experience to share, use the comments and help us grow and learn from each other. I see Sarah is struggling a little bit with technology. Let's hope that her router will decide to use its powers for good today. But maybe we just slowly dive into our time together. And what I will do, I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen. And I will ask you to first shortly introduce yourselves. And challenge number 1, otherwise no pressure. As you think back to some of your key conversations around internal mobility and succession, what is the one thing that makes you excited about the future of internal mobility and succession? And Galia, it's very, very good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm Galia. I am a HR professional over the past 18 years, and probably for the next 18 years, you will find me in the same space. Love talent development and talent management, decided to make of it my areas of expertise, and worked across private and public sectors, where today I serve at Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance in Geneva. So very, very delighted to be with you today. Do I answer your question already, or shall we turn?
Yes, please. Please go on with what makes you excited about the future of our topic today.
Absolutely. So internal mobility is actually one of the reasons that brought me to the passion of talent management. I believe that I've been working in organizations that were up to 2,000 employees, where internal mobility was unlocking so many possibilities, where people did not necessarily have a foundational L&D or did not necessarily have very sophisticated programs. And what I discovered is the power of retention through internal mobility and the power of really providing people a full career pledge within one organization, despite some, very, I would say, frugal environments. So this is what introduced me into the talent management space as well.
Thank you so very much. Christina, good to see you on our screens.
Thanks, Minola. So short introduction, I'm working at Navan, so travel and expense company. And I've been in this space for more than the decade and definitely seen a lot of success stories and also, as well as also not that positive stories around the talent strategies. What is actually exciting is that if we do internal mobility right, and I completely can echo Galia around the retention tool, but it also helps us to shorten also the time to recruit and having in the new seat people who are being already aware of the brand, aware of the company, and they become productive faster. So we've seen also the trend when we're moving the people from one role into the another, internal mobility as well as also internal promotions, that they become productive double time quicker than the new hires. And it's also something for us to consider when we're thinking about the internal mobility and also as the tool for retention and also for the success of the company.
Thank you. Tracy, how wonderful to have you with us.
Wonderful to see you, Manola. I always love seeing you and Galia. Christina, super excited for our conversation. My name's Tracy Brower. My PhD is in the area of the sociology of work, how we affect our work, how it affects us. I'm the Vice President of Workplace Insights for Steelcase, and I've been in around HR and leading and contributing within HR and people systems for a couple of decades now. I write for the company, and I've written a couple of books. The most recent is called The Secrets to Happiness at Work, and I have a brand new book coming out in March called Critical Connections. So super excited about that. And I'm actually really optimistic about this conversation about mobility and succession for a couple of reasons. One, I think we're seeing a lot more demand for transparency. And so I'm seeing lots of organizations trying to move in that direction. And so even if they're not there yet, directionally, they're moving in that way. And lots of, I think, opportunities for employee engagement and ownership that is less cumbersome. I think in the past, we've had a lot of cumbersome systems, and it feels like we can move forward with a lot of the AI interventions that make it less cumbersome and also allow people to have more of their own kind of ownership and engagement in the way that they think about career pathing in conjunction with organizations that support and partner with them.
Thank you. And super happy to see Sarah with us from her mobile at the moment, but please don't worry, if it works back on your laptop, wonderful. If not, we can, for this conversation, we can go agile, not fragile. So welcome and good to see you.
Thank you, Minola, and thank you for this flexibility and agility on the go. So very happy to be here with you. So I'm part of Bayersdorf, so it's a beauty and the cosmetics organization. And so what's probably, what excites me so much about this topic, it's also coming from the real life experiencing we are seeing. And it's really connecting to how much when we are able to increase also internal mobility, we can really foster then the employability of our people. So there is really a piece connecting also to upskilling, reskilling, and really anticipating some of the trends that really make our employees much more employable also in the long term, resulting, of course, in great productivity also within the organization.
I would really, really invite you to maybe take the gems from this first round alone a little bit deeper. And if we can look at some of the ways in which you have seen internal mobility and succession used most efficiently, but more than efficiently, most purposefully and meaningfully. And there are extra points available for creative ways to harness internal mobility and succession. And I will just leave the e-mic hovering around. This will be the unmuting competition rehearsal round. So jump in and build your own conversation. Let's see who practiced the unmuting. Tracy.
I can step out into the water as the first penguin off the iceberg, I guess. We'll see if the water is safe. I'm sure it is with Manola. Some of the things that I've seen that have worked really, really well is just super emphasis on skills. We're seeing an emphasis on hiring for skills-based knowledge more than sort of your resume or your degree or your pedigree. And I'm seeing that used really successfully for internal mobility and succession planning. So lots of emphasis on skill development, micro skill development, visibility for skills. That's one. Another one that I think is working really, really well for organizations that are taking a more innovative approach are, instead of just like moving people from role to role to role in a more traditional or static format, really giving people the opportunity to work outside of their lane or take a certain percentage of their time and do other kinds of things, promoting people based on project work that they can contribute and based on kind of non-traditional career paths. And that leads me to the third. I think we frequently think of internal mobility and succession planning as moving up and expanded roles of influences, locus of control, number of reporting relationships. And the best organizations, I think, and the best practice are the ones who are really, really tuning into the employee. What do they want? What does mobility and succession look like for them? What does an expanded role look like for them? It might be across, it might be into different departments, it might be different levels of kind of work-life navigation. It might be different levels of control over their schedule. And so I think when we expand that understanding, that definition, that's another best practice that's more innovative.
Thank you, Tracy. And it's really nice to hear that you're also echoing some of the things that we already practiced in our day-to-day. I wanted also to share, so we are always thinking about the succession planning as a very traditional 9-box grid biannually annual reviews. What I see works better going into the approach, and it's actually the mentality always on a bench. So meaning that quarterly we have people who can jump in on the projects where we have a need of the business moving into the one direction. Then we have people who are ready to take on the micro assignments. It can be 1 month assignment and can be half a yearly assignments, doing secondments as another alternative to the permanent integration into the role, and then seeing how it goes and then making it permanent. So it's basically for me 2 things: moving away from the traditional ways how we look into the performance assessments and going into the talent marketplace for skills and doing it like more agile into the quarterly reviews.
Galia.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm joining really Tracy and Christina here on 2 points that they mentioned that I found particularly helpful in my practice. One of them was really the stretch assignment. People think sometimes that internal mobility has to be this very heavy thing of applying to positions, applying to new roles, developing a whole marketplace, where sometimes, and the ones that I've seen working the most are those 20% or 30% of one's time for a period of up to 6 months in a completely new area where someone can contribute to and is interested to contribute to, and developing a whole assignment around it that then further on, you can see actually becomes a new role of someone that moves because they had the possibility to get the exposure that they were looking for. So I absolutely join you, Tracy, with that we don't need to make it as complex, right? Let's make it as simple and relatable as possible. And I really liked and it resonated with me what you mentioned, Christina, in terms of the talent reviews. How many times have we not been in these very long and heavy conversations where there's no concrete outcome coming of it. Internal mobility can be such a wonderful way to make it an actionable insight at the end of a talent review and link the result of a talent review and someone's readiness with an opportunity to move inside. And if it's something that is manageable, like it's a stretch assignment, then it's actually becoming very actionable, very feasible. So I think that this is where I've seen it work the most and most implementable in my practice.
And maybe to add and to complement, I would also see that from what I've seen, there is also the role of the manager that is quite important in this one. So I really see a bit of like a tango in between the employee, and I like very much when we say we empower the employees and the employees in the driving seat. But at the same time, as an organization, we need to be clear about, okay, driving seat of what? You know, what are the rules of the game? So there is an aspect of transparency that is absolutely critical. And then it is, what is the role then of the manager in supporting and in partnering the employee in this journey? Because sometimes there is also some tough feedback. You know, we were discussing about talent reviews, but there is also the moment of the development conversation in which we really need to have the type of honesty sometimes in between. Are the aspiration of the employees connected then with the capabilities that they have, but also with the trends of the company and some of the capabilities we know we may need in the future, just to make sure that they are not investing in an upskilling that does not go then in the direction that would be needed. So I think in this, there is also an extra work on equipping managers even more to be able to have those conversations. But then second, it's also holding them accountable on their people manager responsibility as well.
Can I build on that, Manola? I just think that this point about the role of managers and equipping them and holding them accountable are such important points, because I think one of the things that we're challenged with is managers who are reluctant to give up talent. Like, oh, I've got this great talent and I just don't want to give this person up. And I think sometimes we unintentionally disincent managers because they give up talent and then they don't necessarily get replacement or get replacement quickly enough, or we right size the business in the meantime. And that's just like really hard. So I think we've got to have the systems that also kind of surround the manager and make all of those effectiveness behaviors in managers possible.
Well, listening to all your insights, you inspire this next question, and I am actually speaking as I'm thinking, which is not always a good idea, so please bear with me. I would be very curious to take this topic of, let's call them the myths of internal mobility and succession that live inside the minds of the line managers, and, you know, how keeping talent in my team saves me from the problem of looking for a replacement. Well, that cannot be your retention strategy now, can it? Or the 9 box. And I am sure you have a lot of myths that you can share with our audience as, I wouldn't necessarily say cautionary tales, but maybe as how can you navigate difficult conversations and pull back the line managers from pitfalls that you have seen getting people and taking them to unspoken of places. And Christina, I would invite you to be the pioneer for this one, and then everybody please jump in.
Thank you, Manola. And actually I was like, oh my God, I have a perfect one or a perfect two. It's this always vicious couple. The first one, it's the HR job, it's not mine. I love it. I think that's something that we see in our professions very often, and saying that it's all talent, it's their job, they need to post it somewhere. It's not my manager's job in order to encourage my team members to apply and to move on. And the reality is that it's actually the employees have more relationship and more trusted relationship with their direct managers. And also they lean into the career advice mostly to their managers because they see in some ways as also their mentors. And when we look into the data, we see that I think that's one of the recent LinkedIn reports we're sharing, that the people who moved internally, they're triple times more engaged than the people who just started in a job. And the second point, very, very briefly, it's if I let my people move, I will have a gap. And the reality is, if we have the jobs and the people can move, we retain talent in the company, and shifting the perspective from that's my yard and I'm taking care only of all the bad things and bad plants in my yard, having like, okay, it's a garden and how we can actually grow the garden.
I love that metaphor, Christina, and everything you said resonates so much, with daily reality that we confront ourselves with. And it's true that there's always a bit of a balance probably that needs to be found in between internal mobility and business continuity. If we want to play a bit, the devil's advocate. But I really believe that the two are not mutually exclusive. It really depends always by the situation. And this is where we really need to go back in terms of having honest conversations, because if managed well, internal mobility can really contribute to an even more inclusive workplace. The rules of the game I mentioned before, if we establish clearly what are the mobility policies, and it doesn't have to be a rigid frame, but then people are clear about what does it mean, and the entire life cycle of an employee, how it is connected to those rules somehow that are internal. But then what's important is the consistency in the process. And having some sort of employees should understand the criteria for applying to new roles, timelines, eligibility, any restriction that might apply. And I really believe that any employee would understand that maybe you need to hold for 6 more months in a role because that person is super critical for a project. But then he would be waiting for that time, or sometimes he would even let go of an opportunity if we are then very clear on then how we are preparing a path for them afterwards. And same goes for the managers. If they are very clear that the talent is not their talent, it's the talent of the company, and it's the garden that we want to flourish, like Christina said. So it's really a level of maturity and acceptance a bit of what are the rules of the game. I can understand them when you are honest and transparent with me. When we are not saying all what is behind, then it's true that people may just start doubting what is really behind. And this is true both for employees and for managers. So sometimes we really need to help also as HR, or more broadly for the leaders as well, in giving that sort of transparency that enables a real fairness as well.
Maybe let me continue the metaphor of the garden, which is one that I really like. How about if internal mobility, the myth was that flowers can only grow up? There is a very strong myth that internal mobility is only done for the sake of promotion, but so many plants grow beautifully laterally and are actually making beautiful gardens. Stopping here with the metaphor because I'm getting less creative as we continue. But the purpose is to say that, especially nowadays, where I believe that the career ladder has been completely redefined, and I think that you, Tracy, mentioned it in the beginning, the whole concept of career is changing. We need to insist that internal mobility is not only about growing up. How can we continue leveraging and developing skills? And again, I'm bringing in maybe my personal context of smaller organization where those growth upwards mobility sometimes do not exist. You will always find a situation where you have talent that is more ready to grow than actually growth opportunity if growth was only upwards. So for us, internal mobility in the lateral sense is actually a very strong vehicle to have longer careers and keep retaining the good talent from within.
I love it. Sort of lattices versus ladders, right? I think our garden is our metaphor of the day. Thanks to Christina. A couple of other pitfalls or myths that I see getting in our way. One is, I think sometimes leaders or decision makers feel like we shouldn't promote people until they're fully ready. And I always like the idea of kind of a 70% rule. Let's give people the next opportunity. Let's give people the promotion. Let's give them the next step when they're 70% of the way there. Believing in their potential, believing in their opportunity to learn, and knowing that stretch opportunities are super, super motivational for people. So that's one. Another one that I think is also really interesting is sometimes I think leaders have a almost a mindset of scarcity, like, oh, I better not let other people get ahead of me, and I don't want to be overshadowed. And they might actually be threatened by people who are super successful around them. And the alternative, I think that we've all worked with leaders who are like, oh my gosh, I want to surround myself with the very best people. I think that's what we want to do, is try to foster that mindset of abundance. Like, there's plenty of recognition to go around. There's plenty of opportunity to go around. We're going to reward and celebrate internal opportunities and projects and moments that people have to succeed, so that leaders are able to really accelerate the career path and accelerate the learning opportunities and accelerate the visibility. Gayla, you use the language of exposure, accelerate the exposure of employees. And nobody is diminished when they're building up other people. I think that's a cultural element, but I think it can also be a myth or a pitfall that we can be aware of in order to kind of get past that.
Well, I'm challenging myself to build on the garden metaphor, and here's the best I could come up with: that there was a seed planted actually by Sarah, and it finally bloomed. So here's the question: how, and since we are in the second half of our conversation, if we can make it a little bit more actionable, a little bit more practical, how can we make sure that everything related to internal mobility and succession is transparent and is fair and is equitable beyond the policies? But are there any platforms? Are there any procedures? Are there any pieces of advice for having particular conversations with everyone involved? And one of the things that do come to my mind is that every now and again, I hear some nuances in conversations that hint to the fact that a lot of the internal mobility and succession opportunities are perceived to go towards the vocal ones, the visible ones, the natural networkers. So, Sarah, please lead us here, and then would love to hear everybody's take on this.
Yeah, happy to do so. It's a very important piece, this one. I would see, if we go a bit more into the pragmatic, beyond the approach and the philosophy behind that we all believe in, I really think that having a clear competency framework really helps, because then it gives kind of a common language on which you can assess people against. You can really kind of identify where are the opportunities at the same time, and the readiness also for some new roles. And the readiness, as Tracy was mentioning before, doesn't have to be 100%. Otherwise, you would want another role, no? So, but at the same time, it really gives a common language for everyone, managers, employees, but also HR, to approach the topic. And then I think that more and more we have also tools that are helping us, that are actually not only nowadays anymore connecting maybe an employee to some roles according to the skills they have and the experiences, but they take into account also the transposable skills. And so, like Galia mentioned before, this is where we need to go, because it's a bit like the nonlinear path that we want to get inspired for and creativity for. And there is more and more tools that are really helping us to consider, also to match to some vacancies, employees, really according to transferable skills that maybe they would have from a function to another, or maybe because they could bring great value to a specific project because of some experiences they had in the past. And I think this is the way we should really go more and more towards, because I agree, it's career are not necessarily vertical, and they are also not linear. So it is that approach and diverse and creative that we need to make sure that we have tools that enable us to really foster more and more.
Yeah, I love this point about transparency. And one of the additional things that I would add, Sarah, to what you've talked about kind of at this pragmatic level is really setting goals for ourselves and having dashboards, because we want transparency, but then people also want a certain amount of privacy with their careers and their skills and what they offer and what they are hoping for and what their aspirations are. But if we have goals that we're setting and then a dashboard that we're holding ourselves accountable to, we can be transparent with our metrics, but then still potentially protect more of the individual level privacy. So that's one, is dashboards. I think another one, I mean, these are so straightforward, but they're not things that organizations always do. Another one is posting jobs really, really openly, making sure that we're super communicative when we post jobs. It's not just, I need to follow my own company's LinkedIn. My company is communicating it to me on an ongoing basis. Like, hey, this is an open job. You all should be aware of it. So posting openly, communicating really openly, making sure that internal candidates are aware of open positions. And I think a third thing is being really transparent about job descriptions and position descriptions. A lot of times those are only available when a job is open. That's when you can see it. But if you're looking towards something, you want to see, like, what are the years of experience and what are the skills and what are the things I could be building for? And so if we have platforms that allow us to have access to those kinds of information and tools that allow us to kind of assess ourselves against some of that, I think those really play into that idea of transparency and ownership and engagement for our own careers.
Tracy, would you mind if I build up on what you're saying and actually present another idea that we are just implementing right now in my organization, which was exactly what you mentioned in your last word. It's the fact that when you see a job description, you don't really know what is behind it. Who is the team? It all sounds very vague, especially when you have different departments and people really want to move. They kind of understand the value of mobility, but they see a job description. So how do you go beyond? What we implemented recently is on a rolling basis. Once a month, we have a team that is organizing brown bag lunches to introduce, come to my team, roles in my team. And they are just sharing what do they do in the organization, but they're also walking people, the newcomers that have been here for 1 to 2 years, those people who are interested by mobility. They make the job description live. They help people understand what are the typical profiles that they would recruit for if we would go external, but also they help people understand what type of profiles internally would be interesting. So if somebody, for example, works in resource mobilization, but has great experience in implementing countries that we serve, these type of profiles, knowing that they have the institutional knowledge as well, are really high value. And just by sharing that with people, it makes the job much more accessible, but also the skills become more transversable and explainable much easier. So that's a very easy, quick fix. And I will be happy to come back next year and share some ROIs on how this measure was helpful or not to mobility.
Galia, this conversation is recorded, so we have you on record with this. Christina, please.
Thank you, Manala. I actually was exactly wanting to present the same idea as having those roundtables and the managers presenting and pitching their jobs and their departments to the others. But also another point that I wanted to bring, that's actually just posting the job on the career page is not enough. It's a push and pull, and we sometimes need to push. And what I like in some organization in the tech space, there is actually the culture of the internal mobility. And if the person is being in the role for a year and a half, the manager or the career coach internally is coming to them and saying, hey, what is next, where you're going, and proactively saying that, okay, you've been here comfortably enough. So year and a half, you knew that you did the certain contributions. Let's explore what's next. where you would like to go and actually building this internal mobility. And when the role is opening up in the specific department, then they're ready. So which also shortens this time to hire, also internally time to hire, that they need to go to internal interview process to ensure the fairness and transparency, but at the same time, they've been preparing for this job for a longer period of time.
Well, we are 8 painfully short minutes away from wrapping this one up. But I do want to ask, I will try 2 questions, but let's see how it goes. I am sure that we've all heard at least once in the last performance cycle that you are in the driver's seat of your own career. Yet so many conversations tend to be lopsided towards how can HR support line managers to have meaningful conversations. Therefore, I would like to spin this a little bit and ask you, what advice would you give to HR professionals to make sure that the employees really go to conversations about their internal mobility and succession opportunities prepared to really drive them and not just, be there and be reactive or just, go along? How would you advise HR professionals to help people to really be in charge of their career? Tracy, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I've seen organizations, and we actually do this as well, do a really great job with giving people toolboxes and prompts that they can bring in for discussions, setting up mentorship programs so that people are ready to have those conversations. They've kind of had those conversations with mentors in a safe space, and then they're ready to have those conversations with potentially hiring managers or in networking conversations. But I think that toolbox, those discussion starters are a really good idea. And then coaching people about how to approach those conversations, I think is a really, really big deal. The other thing we haven't talked about that I'll just say really quickly, I think we've got to find a balance between supporting people and giving them autonomy in their careers. I think too many organizations are like, hey, it's up to you. Take ownership. It's all about your choices. And then it's like this, the employee is abandoned, right? Like they just don't even feel like they've got the support that they need. So I think it's lots of ownership and lots of opportunity and accountability for the employee to step forward and take the initiative, as well as support and coaching and ideas and people that they can go to when they have questions.
Yeah. I think very practical tool that I would like to advise to the people professionals is when going into the performance reviews, and specifically in the stage of the calibration, we do see who is exceeding expectations. And then on these specifically people who are exceeding expectations and who had been top performance for a couple of quarters, proactively asking the managers the question, what's the next step? Did you had the career development conversation? And then following up on that and really being proactive on this 10% of top talent and making sure that it's one retention strategy, but also that they're ready to do something else. They being comfortable enough, they're ready top performance in their job.
So I have a call for all HR professionals to please consider reusing their talent acquisition partner or their recruiters as key drivers of internal mobility. And we have seen that work very well. So recently we implemented what we call Career Hub, and it's simply a redefined role for talent acquisition partners to move only from bringing candidates into the organization or into a new role to an advisory space where they can actually become also career coaches for employees who don't know necessarily who to talk to, while we are, training managers to be the good managers that they need to be and to really support the career conversations. We know that employees have a safe space to discuss with someone on what are the opportunities internally and how their profile will be adapted. The change has been really huge because for talent acquisition partners, we could see that they have been really reshifting and reskilling their own career and shifting into something that they didn't even realize that they do so naturally. And for employees, actually, talent acquisition partners have been one of the most trusted advisors in the HR space. So people feel very comfortable discussing with someone that both knows the recruitment space, but is an in-house from within. So I hope that this also may help change the thinking that there's so much in HR that we can do to leverage our own people even better.
And maybe to come, to close on this piece, it's really, I think, internal mobility and the changes we are expecting and we want to see. It's really a combination of cultural, structural, communication strategies that we mentioned. No? So it's really a bit of a systemic change as well. It goes beyond then the traditional job-centric model we mentioned. It means integrating skill-based practices. But then in reality, I think there are two aspects we should also work on as HR. One is making sure that we have a culture of continuous and targeted learning. So really promoting a culture of continuous learning to move from this idea of static career progression to one of dynamic development. And then the second one, it's also making sure that there is a reward and recognition system that actually is aligned to that. Not only then for the employees, but really for the people managers as well, as we were mentioning before.
Well, two minutes away, I will squeeze in one final question, but my request for help from you is make it really value dense, like punchline style. Otherwise, no pressure. So here it is. If you could highlight one key critical skill for HR professionals as they go into thinking about how to best integrate talent mobility and succession into talent acquisition, what would that skill be? And maybe one short sentence as to why this one. And ice cream on me when I do get to see you next in the same location for a skill that is not necessarily the first one from the round of usual suspects. And what I will do, I will pass the e-mic around counterclockwise from how we started. That means, Sarah, you will go first. But if anybody in the audience has a skill that they would like to put on our development radar, please use the chat. Sarah.
I would go with the coaching approach.
Thank you. Christina.
Active listening. And the sentence, the people should listen to the people. And then we can understand what we're doing next with all this information.
Thank you. Tracy.
I think it's a terrific skill that we develop initiative and risk taking, because sometimes we've got to step out there to take the initiative and get that next opportunity.
Galia.
System thinking. Help connect the dots for internal mobility.
Thank you all so very much. It was a joy. It was a privilege to have this front row seat for this panel. Thank you, everybody in the audience. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. And please do make sure that you come back and re-listen or use the same link to recommend it to your friends, colleagues, and anyone who enjoys working with people. I will get to welcome you again, I hope, soon. Stay on the link and enjoy the rest of the day 2 and day 3 coming up tomorrow. Thank you all, and thank you, Jessa.
Sorry, technology. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've been around for the last couple of hours, but it's not over yet. This morning, or depending on where you are this afternoon, we will be talking about talent strategy, of course, but using analytics to track and improve hiring metrics. I've got a great panel with me. I'll take a quick second to introduce myself first. So my name is Sally Droza, HR practitioner by trade amongst all of you, turned entrepreneur. Today I run an enterprise called HRWise. And so analytics, I mean, that's where I geek out. And along with me, a bunch of other experts that I cannot wait to speak with. So let's bring them on. Hi, everyone. Great. I've got such a great list of questions that we can take on. But first, obviously, please take a second to introduce yourself. I'll start in order of who I see here on my screen. So let's go ahead with Adam. Oh, no, you're still on mute. Sorry. See, I wasn't the only one today.
Let's give that a double click. All righty. Restart. My name is Adam Hopewell. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those attending here. I've been working in talent and human capital and HR for the last 25 years. 7 different countries, worked on the ground from India to China, 4 years in both of those, in the last 10 years here in the US. I love analytics. I love data. I've studied this intensively at highest levels. And I'm delighted to be able to speak with the distinguished panel and the distinguished audience today. So looking forward to very much to it.
Thank you, Adam. Go ahead, Srirang.
Yeah, hi, everyone. This is Srirang. I work as a head HR and strategy for a minority women-owned enterprise here in New Jersey. Have about 20 years of experience, still feel there are so many things that are coming up every day. So it's a learning as we go on, but very happy to be here and glad I'm joined with very distinguished speakers here. And I'm very sure the audience would like to jump in with their questions as well as we make a progress. Thank you.
Perfect. Go ahead, Lynn.
Hello, Lynn Hubert, Chief Human Resources Officer for Unimed Maritime Solutions. We provide medical and pharmaceutical supplies to the maritime industry. We are the global leader. I am based in Orlando, Florida, and data is also my jam. I really love being able to tell a story through data. I think it builds kind of our reputation and builds our trust within the organization. And so happy to be here to talk all things data.
Great, thank you, Lynn. And finally, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Tidpain. I am the SVP of Global HR Operations for a biotech pharma company. And I have been in HR for 25 plus years, the last 10 of which have been specialized in both total rewards and HR operations. And I always describe my role as the back end techie nerdy parts of HR, very much a data geek as well, very much into analytics, not quite as advanced as some that use maybe Power BI and others. I do pretty much everything in Excel, but probably going to start doing a lot more in AI as we move forward with that. So I'm very excited to be here.
I mean, honestly, that just speaks so highly of how our roles have transitioned over the last few years into more data. And so I'm excited to speak to all of you about it. As the speakers mentioned, of course, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to do so on the chat, and we'll be looking out for that. But nonetheless, we do have a good list of thoughts that we can start with. And maybe I'll start with you, Kelly, and the rest of you feel free to jump in after. Before we get into the data in and of itself, let's ground ourselves maybe a little bit in strategy when it comes to hiring. So does your organization have a formal talent hiring strategy? And if so, what are some of the key components there?
We do. So one of the things that I kind of was thinking through is how talent all ties together, not just with talent acquisition, but sort of the entire employee life cycle. And all of it for us is grounded in our core principles and our core competencies that tie to those principles. And it starts with the job description, having our core principles and competencies spelled out, as well as knowledge, skills, and abilities that are unique to that job or that job family. And so we're very much looking for the fit to the company and the company culture and the company values, as well as the hard and soft skills that are needed for that job. And it's really a combination of both, because if you have someone who's got a great skill set, but they're not a people person, or they're not a team player, or they're not very innovative, it's not going to work out. And so we really use a variety of different sources for recruiting. Our largest actually is employee referrals, followed closely by LinkedIn, I believe, is our second one. But it is a lot of it is just through word of mouth, networking, employee referrals, and we have a pretty set process that we go through in terms of the recruiter screen, the interviews. I think we're starting to use a bit of AI on some of that front end sourcing piece, specifically within, I think, LinkedIn, we've started using that. And then just making sure that the hiring manager, the recruiter, everyone is very comfortable with the candidate by the time we make that offer. And then we also do some checks afterward, both with the hiring managers and with the new hire, on how did the process go? Are there any things we need to improve? So it's all about continuous improvement, and not just thinking, oh, we're good, let's just stick with how it is. We never keep anything the same because it's how we've always done it. We always look to improve and see what else we can tweak and make it a more enriching experience, both on the candidate and the hiring side.
Anybody else in terms of what you're doing in your little neighborhood, Lynn?
I think the talent strategy starts really with workforce planning and really how it aligns with the business, making sure that you're really looking at like the skill gaps within the organization, but not just talking about today, talking about like long term. What does the organization want to look like in 3 to 5 years? And then making sure your talent can align with those, strategic objectives, right? So I think the talent strategy starts with workforce planning and making sure that it aligns with the business goals. And then obviously, like Kelly said, just making sure that you have a really great candidate experience, making sure that, that you're looking at sourcing, right? Your employer brand, making sure that you're looking at performance, right? And making sure that you have those analytics to tie into those things that you want to measure.
So let's go straight into it then, Lynn, and maybe you can pick up here from where you left off. We're talking about metrics. So what are some of the core metrics that you're looking out for to be able to evaluate your hiring strategy?
So here within Unimed, I think we look at, ramp up, right? How long does it take a warehouse operative to be productive in their role? How long does it take for a salesperson to get their first sale, right? What does that look like? I think it's really kind of retention, getting feedback. How is their, first 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, intro period? How does the manager feel about them? How do their peers feel about them? I also think that does the position align itself with the business goals, right? And making sure that hire is aligned with the business goals. Sometimes, we've made mistakes, right? We've gone and we said, hey, we need this position that's going to align with, our future goals. And then we start recruiting, we start looking at the candidates, we bring them on board, or we're about to extend offer. And then we realize we really didn't know what the position was, entailed. And so I think that's kind of the things that you want to measure is, again, the effectiveness, right? The quality of hire. Again, if it's strategic and how it aligns to the strategic, objectives, and then obviously the candidate experience.
Great. Adam and Srirang, anything to add here?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to be becoming a little controversial on this. From my experience, and it's been fairly broad and fairly deep, so much of TAs really run on gut feel. It's dominated by subconscious biases that we're all riddled with, and we should all be willing to accept. It's not essentially well designed for great experiences for either candidates or employers, and is pretty much reliant on generic, anachronistic job descriptions, a industrial era process, and really needs reinvention at a white sheet or a clean page level in many ways. I think a number of the organizations I've worked with over the years have tried to do that. I've tried to do that with varying levels of success. Some of those have sung greatly. But if we're looking towards the analytics side of this, then what is it we're trying to solve for here? And I'd say that trying to simplify that down is the key to being able to make concrete maneuvers on that. I like to start with what I call a CIRA, where I look at all the stakeholders in a process, identify what their ideal responses are, and then for each of those ideal responses, how do we help to generate that? But from a technical analytical perspective, predictive validity is the number one. Like it's a businesses or a TA functions or a TA teams, talent teams, I prefer, because I like to see it integrated. Overall capability to analytically evaluate how likely someone is to be a high quality or a high performing talent. And then also you need to look at the reliability. These are very basic science of human capital concepts, but so rarely used. I almost never hear people talking about correlation coefficients. Like Hunter and Schmidt's work has been there since 1998, involving 85 years worth of data to analyze which are the most recommended practices within a TA process for high correlation coefficient to on-the-job performance. Yet 99% of TA leaders and talent professionals I've ever encountered I've never heard of the work of Hunter and Schmidt. And it's the fundamental, to me, it's the fundamental white paper in the science of talent evaluation and personnel assessment. I think there's some real fundamentals there that the whole group have had a very touchy-feely background in some ways, which isn't a bad thing, but it needs to be combined with the rigor of science, combined with the power of analytics to really serve the business and the candidates in ways that it's just not, they're not being served at this time.
I agree completely, Adam. That's really interesting that you say that it's a little controversial. I don't know that it is, at least not for me. I think it's talent, and like you said, acquisitions kind of through the whole thing is both an art and a science. You've got to have both. There is that gut feel, is this the right candidate? And sometimes you can't necessarily identify what it is that makes them perfect or makes them not quite. But it's interesting you talk about sort of that, it's almost that predictive analytics piece at the beginning versus the more kind of reactive measuring how did we do. And you're right, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that, but that really gives me some stuff to think about.
In my example from my most recent process designed and architected for BehaveOps, there's 288 data points being gathered through the process. They're clustered into 5 different sections, which are basically evaluating different streams, which then you can correlate the different streams. One is on knowledge, skills, experience, and cognitive ability. One is on technical competency, prioritize technical competencies. One is on values alignment. One is on applied competency as done through simulation. Like each of those streams, you can take the data points from those and correlate those against which are giving you the highest predictive capability versus high on the job performance. And then you can look at the composite and see how well overall you're doing. You can segment and cut this a million ways, and it allows you to iteratively improve the process, to look where are your lowest correlation coefficients, where are you not able to predict, what processes are you using that aren't predicting accurately or well, and then improve those. So it means it's a dynamic system as well when you're using data in such a manner.
Absolutely. Srirang, did I see that you wanted to maybe add a comment here?
Yeah. Just to continue with what Adam mentioned about the gut part, thankfully we are still hiring humans, so it's a very important aspect, in terms of making that judgment. I understand we all have used metrics a lot, and they have helped us to a very large extent. But couple of things that come to my mind when we look at about metrics strategy, I'll add on to it more about it. But there has to be a objective on the metrics. What's the objective? There has to be objectivity to it, because otherwise the data is just lost. There is so much data that we will keep playing upon, and we get lost into it. And the third point is relevancy. What is this relevant to? And the last aspect is empathy, which I believe a lot comes to the aspect of gut and intuition. And these aspects sometimes get lost because there is so much metrics involved. We get lost in the data that we forget the human aspect. And one of famous quotes that we all have as HR professionals, we swear by or we work on it, is that we hire for attitude, right? Skills can be trained. So as long as the attitude, and it is still relevant in today's era with all the AI and the machine learnings, the LLMs coming forward and throwing us so much data, that aspect still stays true, that someone who has the right attitude will pick up that skill, that technical aspect of the job. And there has to be an importance given to that aspect still, because AI will keep churning. I have seen so many resumes lost because the AI did its own versioning in terms of identifying keywords, and it was throwing only those resumes which were tailored or they were made for a particular job description. And you lose a very valuable, good thinking candidate in that process. So we have to continue using our human judgment, intuition, gut, that aspect when we are making decisions as far as hiring talent strategy is concerned.
I love where this conversation is taking us, because you join a panel about metrics and hiring metrics. You wouldn't expect to start talking about gut intuition and empathy, which I think is so important. And I think also HR as a practice sometimes could have a bad reputation for not using science. And so here what we're talking about is combining the two, which I think is so important. So I'm going to give Manisha a moment to introduce yourself, and we're going to jump right in there where we left off.
Thank you so much. Manisha Gupta. I lead people intelligence products for Oracle. I think I have two sides of my life. One is a lot in technology, AI, product management. The other is a lot of HR and finance professionals. And so I really enjoy being on Hacking HR panel. Thanks for having me here, and here to learn and share whatever little I know.
Well, you bring a great expertise, and I'm curious to hear about you based on what you jumped into and what you're listening to. An organization who wants to delve into more analytics when it comes to hiring. Manisha, where do you recommend that they start?
So I think it'll depend on the maturity of the organization. And I heard some of the comments recently, right? So there's like a spectrum. So lots of the companies are still, I would say, just across the spectrum, early stages. Focus tends to be on efficiency of hiring. So they're focusing on hiring velocity, time to hire, the basics, right? Which is also important, because if you don't have the basics right, going to mature is almost like folly. You start you're building a castle on shallow bricks. I don't know what the analogy would be. You've got to get the basics right. But then we start moving from efficiency to effectiveness of hiring. And when I say effectiveness, that's where the real value or the ROI of hiring breaks in. Quite a few ways of slicing and dicing it. I think I heard Adam say a few really interesting things. But in the end, it's about quality of hiring, right? How long are the people staying? How effectively have they contributed to the team also? Because sometimes it's not hiring for an individual. We rarely hire an individual to have them sit on an island. So I also have started looking into aspects of, are you hiring for a good fit potential for the team? Because the same data scientist could be a very high performer in team A and may not gel really well with team B. So understanding like the aspects of the managers, the teams, you have a lot of let's just say creative thinkers in a team. They just love brainstorming. And now you hire a serial thinker, structured thinker, and he's the only one, and the manager doesn't even take the, uh, I've been in this situation where I've talked to a manager, wanting to be different, want to be a little bit structured. You bring in a rock star, high potential, structured thinker, and you forget to establish the trend. Like, why did we hire this person? Within 3 months, the high performer is not performing very well, or the team has, started getting anxious about changes that they did not consciously remember they wanted to make. So hiring has become a much bigger thing, especially with the new agentic workflows and the agents entering the workforce. The number of people who are expected to deliver or do a specific job is decreasing for whatever it's worth. That's a reality. All the automatable work is getting automated step by step. So now whoever remains has to really be very aware of what they bring to the table and how they can leverage each other's strengths to become like 1+1 got to become more than 2. Right. So for that, the awareness of what I bring to the table has to be very acute. Awareness of what I expect from the team, how I can contribute. All that has to be very, very acute. And somehow I think the interview processes and the hiring cycles have to evolve to tap into that. So one KPI I look into is your candidate pipeline. Like, how long does a manager pipeline for strategic roles versus transient roles? It's different, but specifically strategic roles, how strong is your pipeline? How good is your candidate pool? How much effort do you take even before you extend an offer to a person? And then how long do they stay, perform, and really contribute to the team? So the effectiveness parts of it actually is like an onion. You can keep peeling it depending on, again, the maturity of the organization. There's a lot we can talk about.
Anyone have a comment on that? I mean, I can jump. Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
don't worry.
I want to hear it for sure.
I think when you think about TA's value to the business, a good way to think about this, I'd like to just share a metaphor. I think the most powerful metaphor I've ever come up for regarding this, and then look a little bit more about the analytics distinct KPIs, metrics we use to measure this. And the metaphor I'd like to share with you is I think that a great way to think about the entirety of this is as an ecosystem in which there are talent seeds, there is organizational soil, and then there are the business dynamic skies above them all. You can take the greatest talent seed in the world, but you put it in a soil that's inappropriate for it because of organizational style, behavioral norms, technical competency, whatever the behavioral, the soil of that team or that organization requires for that seed to germinate. What do we want when we bring new talent into an organization? We want them to thrive. We want them to do the best work of their career. We want to be part of the generative crop of business results that are being generated by the business. In order to do that, the talent seed has to suit the soil and has to be able to work under the business skies. If the business is under rapid change, certain talent seeds, even in the right talent soil, wouldn't suit that. They won't adapt quickly enough. So it's really about understanding and categorically defining the business situation, the organizational soil, understanding the business situation, and then really understanding the capability of that seed to flourish, to germinate, to flourish in that soil under those skies. So that's one of my most powerful metaphors. I've shared this with boards all over the world, and it really resonates to me about how I think about TA and talent. And in fact, I hate TA being separated out from talent management and from talent development. I think this is an artificial clustering which brings damage to us looking holistically at talent and its capability. And that's when I come to the metrics. I say that's looking at 3 distinct levels. I love to cluster things in 3s, starting at strategic level. I think really, if we're looking at strategically, it's about the timely provision of well-defined capabilities that drive organizational high-value initiatives. And for that, I would look to, as a metric, and I push my whole entire HR and people functions to focus on what I call return on talent investment as a primary metric for that business, for that function. It's not just for the function either, it's for the whole freaking business. For every dollar you're spending on talent, so that's the entire combined cost of every salary, every cost of company element of every individual you're spending, plus the HR, people, culture, talent function cost included. For every dollar you're investing there, how much in your primary business metric value are you creating? A lot of organizations you can use profit, a lot of organizations you can use revenue, other organizations that's not their primary strategic deliverable, and therefore you're looking at different metrics on that. But you're trying always as best you can to tie this to a dollar value. So you can say for every dollar I'm investing in talent, we are generating $1.23 in returns on that basis. And that metric it's a dynamic metric. It's a snapshot, but it's a dynamic metric. So just because you're generating 88 cents, for example, per dollar invested, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. The business could be in a growth period. There could be many dynamic factors which occur there, but it's about the trend. It's about the trend showing an improvement of that trend over time. So I think if strategically at the highest level, using return on talent investment is probably the primary and most interesting metric I know of, at least. At a more tactical level, I think talent density is a really powerful one. And this is basically the percentage of people within an organization that are evaluated as being high performers in the roles that they're doing. Yes, you have to have structured talent review processes. You have to have systems which will enable you to identify that. But once you can, like I was able, with my work with Behaviox, over a 3-year period, we moved our talent density from approximately 30 to 60%. And this is an applied AI company in hyper growth with very dynamic market skies above it, like organizational soil, still trying to learn a little bit about who itself it was, and then trying to embed cutting edge data scientists, machine learning experts into that soil under those skies, and have them perform well, have them generatively feel like they were contributing to the business and to be able to measure that. So I think talent density is a really primary one at the tactical level, and operationally, quality of hire for me. I'm going to, is it Shree's point on that? I think you could boil that down a little bit more, and essentially that's predictive validity and then reliability. If your evaluation processes are able to predict high performers and they are reliable using analysis like Cronbach's Alpha or McDonald's Omega, then you can actually establish whether those are reliable practices you're using and are they validly able to predict the capabilities you need for your business.
I have a follow-up question for you, Adam. This is fascinating. And there's so many measures I haven't thought about, and I'm going to bring back and figure out how to get all the data points for them. Going back to sort of the art side of it, how would you measure some of those soft skills pieces of, did the employee, let's say, contribute to the culture, bring the right values? It's a lot easier, I think, to do the metrics on the ROI, the return on investment of the total cost of HR and talent divided by either the ROI or, the profitability or EBITDA or different metrics. But do you have a way currently that you measure sort of that soft impact, that either, cost avoidance or, like I said, impact on culture, things like that?
Absolutely. I always describe this as the science and the art, the head and the heart. These things need to work cohesively together. Even the data that I generate or we generate across entire giant hiring scenarios, I describe that to hiring managers and executives, other executives, as being directional data. Just because someone scored overall a 77% match and someone else scored an 83% match to our ideal talent profiles doesn't necessarily always mean that the 83 should be the higher and the 76 shouldn't be. But it's directional data saying that over the criteria that you've established, and I'd always say those are prioritized competencies, and we use values. One of the sections or segments I've always used is values assessment. We provide the values of our organization for what we call solving for Z, the third stage of interview. We provide the values, we give the definitions of those values, and we just ask for the candidates to give us examples, real examples of times where they thought they brought those to life. So even in the assessment practice, we've got a stream that's dedicated only to that. And it's not convoluted with technical competency and knowledge, skills, experience, or other matters. We try and keep that data as clean as possible, that you can correlate it towards cultural fit and adherence and tenure, especially once they're in the organization. You also then need to design two elements, I'd say. One is your talent review processes to make sure that those elements are being taken into consideration. Is this person amplifying the entire output of the team through their contribution to the culture of that team, or through their behavioral activities? And for most organizations I work with on this, waiting for talent reviews, typically done on a 6-month, maybe annual basis, means the data's too old. You've got to get data faster into your system. So I think that developing something along the lines of achievement targets for 30, 60, and 90 days, customized for each role, like not necessarily generated freshly for each role, but customized. So that basically those are measuring. And I thought when we introduced those first at Behaviorbox, we'd get an uproar, like people say, oh, we're being measured from day one. But actually, it turns out that the response from the new hires that we're having was exceptionally strong. They were so happy to have it clear what achievements were they targeting, and then celebrating those achievements with them. And those achievements can be a mixture of both hard business outputs plus gelling with the team, creating the atmosphere and the feeling amongst exemplifying the behavioral norms necessary to really help the rest of the team generate great results as well as themselves. So I think there's a number of factors we could feed into this, but those are the couple of the top of mind ones that come to me, Kelly.
Manisha, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Kelly. Sorry, I'm on my phone. My laptop just decided to die on me last minute. I think the start is defining the culture. So if organizations, I love the question, by the way, and I've talked to so many companies and executives. Very few are actually able to tangibly even explain what does culture mean, right? So if we don't know what it means, it's kind of not easy for a candidate to understand if they are going to be a culture fit and they can add to the culture. So some of the really leading organizations and leaders, very clear for us, culture is growth of an employee. How do you measure that? At least 3 to 4 years of retention individually. Do we have promotions going on? How much internal mobility and internal promotions are offered, right? I've heard things like the performance has to be high, pretty high. We expect everybody to be a high performer. There's no bell curves in our company, but we expect performance to be so high that after a year, we want to see everybody on the 9th box in the talent review, right? And some leaders are really so strong about it that they will do everything in their capacity to mentor, nurture, ensure that the person is right fit for the right role. And, one-on-ones are conducted such in a similar manner. So I would say first is tone is set at the top. If we can define what the cultural indexes for our companies is, whether it's retention or engagement or team effectiveness, we have that, where we kind of measure the multiple different KPIs within the team vis-a-vis the output of the team. So very easy to do for teams like sales and services, where it's a tangible output. For engineering, for medical, maybe patient outcomes, engineering outcomes, you can still find a way to do it. But overall, as a team, by adding these 2 people to the team in the last 1 year, did the overall output of the team go high? It's kind of hardcore, but I think the soft and the hard measurements have to go hand in hand. And you start looking at that dashboard which says, yeah, my sales quota attainment for this team did on an average go by 2 percentage points. And then you start having conversations. What happened? Well, the one-on-ones were conducted very cohesively. We've had if I go on the analytics part of it, we have done for such an organization insights on why is it that the sales leader is doing so well? Well, because his culture is a lot about engagement and collaboration. How does he make sure he does that? So interestingly, we reviewed just the patterns at the metadata level within the emails, and we found that the sales leader used to send a lot of emails internally, and he would kind of encourage the sales reps to send a lot of emails outside. So you connect outside, and I will be the person removing the obstacles for you. Right? So I think, if we can articulate what culture means to us, and it's a hard conversation, especially at the ELT level, then connecting it back to what can it mean to recruitment, to talent, to retention, to engagement becomes a much easier journey. But the key is how many people are having those conversations. So I'm really glad you brought that question up, Kelly, in the panel today.
Nisha, like surely the consideration there is though that as well that there's organizational culture and then the distilled version of that actually exists on the ground in teams.
Absolutely. And they're very different. Like I
And they
think
should, they should
yeah.
have an alignment. That's what we're hoping to try and establish. But I think one thing, if we're looking at practical takeaways for our audience here, one thing I found very effective on this is the use of role model colleagues within the interviewing process. So basically having our technical competency evaluation interview, which is structured, signposted entirely. At minute 23, I could tell you exactly what's happening in any of the interviews that are being run. They're that structured and they're that signposted and that apples to apples to be fair to the candidates involved with that. But also using role model colleagues, which is basically someone who's in the role, as long as you've got one of these, who's in the role, who's performing well, who knows that team really well, and is an information source about that living culture of the team for the candidate. I like to see this as mutual due diligence. Career decisions are important investment decisions made by both the company and the individual joining the organization. Like if you want to make an investment decision, you don't do it without like trying to get under the skin and do your due diligence around that. So I think giving exposure to someone like a role model colleague to understand the culture of the organization in correlation or in connection to its technical competencies that are expected to be produced or outputs expected by the role. And then in a separate interview, we actually look at organizational level values by providing the value and asking, talk me through an example of a time where you thought that you brought that to life. Why did you do that? Or how did you do that? And just generatively exploring underneath the skin of not just what people can do, but how they get that done or how they've got that done, the exemplified experience.
There's such good comments happening. And by the way, there's beautiful comments also happening on the LinkedIn. Everyone's really enjoying what you guys are saying. One thing I'll say is in between the lines, what we're hearing actually is the storybook has to be complete. So we're talking specifically about talent acquisition today, but it is nowhere without the company vision, the company culture, the values, and then all the way until way past performance and succession, et cetera. So I'd love, before we wrap up, maybe one last question and maybe start with you, Lynn. How do you tell that story within an organization to make sure that the importance of talent acquisition comes out from the beginning of the story all the way to the end of it?
I think it's all one story, right? It's all interconnected. I think if I kind of look at what we've been talking about, really, it's kind of the core competencies, right? And using role models in order to, one, really define like our culture. So when we're talking about like core competencies, for example, it's not just technical skill set, but it's also the values, right? And so each, along the organization, right, we should all be embodying the company values. And so how do you go and do that and measure that, right? Establishing core competencies and be able to measure that for each of those individual values. I think that when you're talking about TA development, performance, right, they're all, like I said, interconnected. We want to make sure that we're promoting internally, that we're limiting, external hires, that we're only looking at, external when, there's a skills gap analysis. We're just making sure that everything kind of informs whether we build or we, buy talent, right? We get talent from the outside.
Absolutely. So I'm mindful that there's only 4 minutes left and everybody here has such great value. Let's do final, or like, what is the audience walking away with from you in a single sentence today? Let's start with you, Kelly. No pressure.
A single sentence. Your data has to tell a story.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Lynn.
In one sentence, remember the human element in your data.
Love it. Shriran. And maybe more than one sentence. We haven't heard that much from you today.
I think just a quick 1 minute. So we talk of talent acquisition as a very external factor. But we tend to forget the aspect of people whom we have hired in a year, 2 years time. And these guys might be ready for roles that are available internally, right? So always the acquisition cost cannot be external, right? We already invested, all the acquisition has happened. The person has got acquainted with the culture and they have been the right fit because there is so much effort taken in growing them in the organization. So we need to start looking at talent acquisition internally as well, through the internal job postings or promoting people internally than acquiring outside. That said, on closing comments, I would stick to the objectivity. The objective and objectivity has to be there when we look at the metrics, and of course the empathy factor. We just cannot surrender to AI just like that. There has to be the empathy factor has to continue in the acquisition aspect. Thank
I
you.
hope we can continue on this conversation because the objectivity and the gut feel and the empathy all together is such an interesting conversation to have, but they can coexist. So thanks for that thought, Shriran. Let's go with Manisha.
I'll say, well, if sustainable, profitable growth can only happen through people, right? Doesn't matter. You're a CFO, CHR, or whichever head you are. And profitable growth, yeah, you can squeeze today and have wrong people in the wrong roles. But sustainable means the right people are in the right roles and thriving. So as long as we can ensure that the fitment, the two-way fitment is critical. I love my job, so I'm going to give it my best. And you have hired the best, so you know you'll get the best. If we start doing it at every single level, the organizations will thrive and the individuals will thrive. And sustainable, profitable growth means we all earn a lot more and we meet our dreams. So
That's what
my
everyone wants to hear. And finishing up with Adam.
Alrighty. I struggle to put it in a few words. I just want one quick concept I'm going to try and embed, though. The business side of this. We are business service to the business. We are here to produce business results, so organizational results and non-for-profit. A simplest way of taking this to express it to our talent acquisition teams is that they are portfolio managers for serious amounts of investment. If you took, for example, a single hire being on a 200K cost to company, for example, you're saying that their average tenure is 2.5 years, which means you're making a $500,000 investment decision, or you're helping to guide that. You've got a rec load of, say, 6. You're talking a $3 million investment portfolio that a single TA person is coordinating. Think about this from a business perspective. This is a business investment to business returns. Like, not all hardcore numbers, there is cultural elements of that as well, but those should feed into the numbers and be seen. So anyway, first point, business. This is a business activity. Correlate to the business. Second of all, correlation coefficients, please, TA community. I'm going to get into your correlation coefficients. You should be able to say what correlation coefficient you're at as an overall predictive capability within your organization. Are you at 0.45? Are you at 0.5? Are you at 0.8? If you're at 0.8, even my hands go up in applause at that because I've only ever reached that once or twice. And finally, learn, unlearn, relearn. Just because it's how we've done things up to date doesn't mean it's how we have to continue to do things. Learn, absorb the science, absorb the analytics, absorb the data, absorb the people practices. Unlearn, discard what's not helping you achieve the business aims that you're trying to serve, and then relearn. Instill that, create and devise architect systems which deliver that sustainably and reliably for a business.
Thank you, everyone. What a great panel. For the listeners, thank you for your comments. I know all the panelists appreciate them. If you want to connect with us, our links are in the comments, so you can find us all on the comments. And please stick around. The next talk is recruitment process innovation for SMBs. So once again, thanks all the panelists for this beautiful discussion.
Thank you. And thank you, Sally,
Thank you,
for being
everyone.
a great leader on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Adam Kazansky. I am the Senior Director of Commercial Revenue at Spark Hire. Welcome to today's session on recruiting process innovation for SMBs. I encourage everyone to let us know where you're dialing in from or where you're logging in from. It's always great to see where people are streaming these sessions. So please put that in the chat right now. It'd be great. And while you're doing that, I think it's safe to bring our entire panel on stage right now. Let's get the gang all here.
Gang's here.
Here we go.
Everyone.
An absolute powerhouse panel in the world of talent acquisition. And I'm not just talking about myself. Well, no, I really am excited. Thank you so much. I'll just do some intros, and while we're doing that, some extra people can log in, or people had stepped away from the last session, which was absolutely fantastic. But thank you all for joining us. Again, my name is Adam Kazansky. I'm going to be the host of today's session. I'm here on behalf of Spark Hire, who is a sponsor for the event. And I just want to quickly orient our audience to who Spark Hire is. We are a hiring software that drives collective, people-driven approach to hiring, helping overburdened teams, which is something we will definitely be talking about today, make successful hires. We help you go beyond revenues and help you manage every aspect of hiring to create a positive impact on the candidates, on your talent acquisition team if you have one, and on those pesky hiring managers that we always try to get involved in the process. Our solution involves Spark Hire Recruit, which is our applicant tracking system, and Spark Hire Meet, which is our talent assessment solution, which consists of automated reference checks, behavioral assessment, and of course, video interviews. Okay, now that that's done, let's dive into the panel. First, I guess it's a nice segue when we're talking about Spark Hire to introduce Spark Hire CEO, Josh Tolan. Josh, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here. And Adam, you're a great host, great hype man. I got to take you around everywhere.
I do parties as well, so please feel free. We also have Dr. Roz Cohen, who is the Chief People Officer at Laird Norton Weatherby. Welcome, Roz.
Well, thanks for having me.
And thank you, because I was thinking, do I go Roz, Rosalind? And the name right there has it perfect. So thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, finally, last but not least, is Jennifer Howell, Director of People and Culture at the American Marketing Association. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this. It's my very favorite thing in the whole world.
Well, then you're in the right place at the right time. Okay, great. So why don't we dive in? So obviously we're talking about recruiting process innovation for SMBs. And I think anyone here who's listening who is part of a small to medium business or has been one know that in the world of talent acquisition for these types of organizations, in many instances, you are a jack of all trades. You're not just doing talent acquisition, doing a lot of other stuff for the company as well. I guess, Roz, we will start with you. What are some of the biggest challenges that are unique to recruiting that, let's say, these enterprise organizations don't really understand when you are a small to medium-sized business?
What we think about in my company when we're looking at recruiting is what are the characteristics of the individual that we need to have that are successful characteristics. We call them these threshold attributes that make people successful in our organization. And how do we create a process that helps us match the skills and these attributes together so we hire the right people. So for us, it's really learning about what are the things that make us successful? What are the things that make our people successful? And sometimes that takes a little bit of time to figure out. And then how do we create the process that allows us to see those things, ask the right questions, and then hire the right people to be able to do that work.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Anybody else want to jump in and build on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think Roz nailed it. And the key word there is process. I think at a lot of small and medium-sized employers, as Adam, you said, oftentimes hiring sits in HR. There isn't a dedicated talent acquisition team. So the HR team, they're all a jack of all trades, are doing so many different things. And so hiring is just squeezed in amongst all these other things. So to me, it's the biggest challenge is exactly what Raj said. It's like, yes, we need to identify who our ideal candidate profile is and how do we map a process to attract and find and screen and identify those people. But doing that within the constraints of being the HR team running the process and trying to orchestrate a process when you have hiring managers who want everything done now and you've got all these other priorities within the business pulling you away from that. So to me, that's what jumps out, is one of the biggest challenges for any small or medium-sized employer.
I would also say, to kind of put a fine point on it, Josh, is that it's not just that we're doing a lot of things if we're the only person handling HR strategy, if we're handling benefits with somebody else, if we're working on payroll, if we're doing onboarding, if we're doing offboarding, employee relations, coaching. I mean, this is stuff that fills your brain and takes up a lot of your mental energy. And so having to move from one thing to another with the same kind of thoughtfulness to the candidate experience and to the hiring manager experience, it requires a lot. So I think there is something very special about people that do recruiting in a small and medium kind of environment, because it requires you to use every skill in your toolbox to be present in the moment when you're needed to.
It's a great point. So, what's really interesting, I think, in the world of small to medium-sized businesses, I'm just going to say SMBs going forward, but what's really unique in that world is I feel like there's been a shift over the past few years where, you used to post one of those evergreen roles as a small to medium-sized business and you get 150 applicants. Because you're not one of the big name organizations, you didn't see that massive influx. But something has shifted in the market. And what I hear all the time is, a year ago, I posted this role, I had 150 applicants. Now I post this role, I get 500 applicants. So we know that that may sound good at first, when you first hear it. Well, so many applicants, what a wonderful thing to have. But it definitely creates its own challenges. Jennifer, what's the risk now for small to medium businesses for not having a system in place to adapt to this change that we're now seeing in the market?
I mean, I have big feelings about this. If you have a position that's always open, my first question is to interrogate why. Is it due to high turnover? Is the business growing? If it's the former, then you have to do some work with the hiring manager and get information from exit interviews, like what didn't hit right, what didn't work the last time. If it's the latter, it's a great way to reframe a job posting that says, we're having amazing growth and we want you to be part of it. And shifting the mindset from the candidate finalist the first time around to candidate bench. I encourage everybody that interviews with me, connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll see a job as soon as it's posted. Let's keep in touch. And so I think things like that can foster better relationships with candidates that can go further in a role. That's kind of something that's worked for me.
Yeah, and I guess when you think about that influx, there is a needle in the haystack situation that you're in. And Roz, where are you finding the process to find that needle?
It's a great question because with the 500 candidates, and we know the market is what the market is, right? There are a lot of people who have lost their jobs. And so folks are struggling and really wanting to get new employment. That's where doing a little pre-work before the position's ever opened is critical, right? So one of the things that I talk about here at my organization and when I was doing consulting is the interview and the conversation before the job is ever needed, right? So, okay, we have this position. Usually the process is, okay, so-and-so quits. You end up taking the job description, looks good. We post it out and we just go forward. We never really ask the question or take the pause to be like, do we need this role in the way in which it has been listed? Is this role really that important? Not that we don't need the body different, right? But are the responsibilities the same? And do we ask the person leaving if we have that opportunity? Do we ask the people on the team? Do we ask with those in the organization that interact with that position to say, what is it that you do? How do you work with this person? And then say, okay, this is the job description we had. This is the job description we may need. How do we merge those things? And use that as the catalyst really to figure out who is the right person or what are the right skills, cultural fit, and leadership responsibilities for this role. And being able to do that in advance. It takes time, God only knows, but it's critical.
Yeah, that intake meeting, Roz, it's key, because it's like we have to be as fluent in this role as our hiring managers. And we will only be as fluent as the information that they tell us. So having a really intentional intake meeting questionnaire that you're going through so that they can rely on you to partner with them to find the right person and to suss out what are the things that are different.
That's right.
And what I'm looking for now than what I had in the incumbent before.
That's right.
So I am so with you on this one.
Absolutely.
And those are great points. And I think, to tie it all together here, without these processes and things in place, with all this prep work we do before the hiring process, without thinking about how we're going to run a process to deal with this influx or this larger volume of applicants, we as an SMB run the risk of losing the advantage that we have as an SMB, which is speed and agility in the hiring process. The reality is, as an SMB, you're not going to be able to pay as much as the big company that's out there. You're not going to offer the same benefits. You're not going to have the employer brand that people have heard about and can look up a million reviews of people working at that organization. And bigger organizations have those advantages over you in terms of attracting and essentially bringing on employees to their organization. And so as a small organization, your advantage is speed and the candidate experience. And those two things give you the opportunity to impress candidates along the way, where you're actually able to overcome some of those shortfalls when in terms of like the offer that you're actually able to make at the end of the process by being able to show you're an employer of choice through the hiring process that you run. So that's, to me, like the big risk with this influx of applicants and not being prepared to deal with it through process that you run as an SMB.
Yeah. So, I mean, the theme that I'm definitely hearing from everything that you all said and Josh kind of summed up for me was it's have the process before you publish that role, like have a very thorough and thoughtful process. Make sure, common phrase, all your ducks are in a row here, but ensure that when that role is posted, you are ready so that you're not wasting the candidate's time, you're not wasting your time or the rest of the team's time. Jennifer, you did bring up two words that I think a lot of recruiters are scared of, and that's hiring manager. So I do want to talk a little bit about collaboration with hiring managers. We know how critical it is, but it's not easy. And for one of the most important pieces, collaboration in the recruiting process, it's some of the most difficult problems that we can resolve. So I'd love for somebody to go off mute to jump in and talk a little bit about, how do we go about solving it? What is standing in the way of collaboration with some of the most critical people that we work with?
I mean, as a small to medium-sized business, so the American Marketing Association, there's 65 of us, right? So I know everybody at the organization, and I have relationships with everyone at the organization. I heard there was a session earlier on the tech and tools session earlier with Felicia Blasberg, that the recruiter has to be fluent in the job. And the only way that that can happen is collaboration with the hiring manager. If the hiring manager needs somebody in the role, the only way that that can happen is with my help. And so it's a relationship that matters quite a lot. So if somebody's left the organization, I've been the one processing their exit. If somebody's coming on board, like, we're the first people that they see. So I think if the hiring manager can understand that you're there to help them, then it's going to be fine. And we have a benefit of that in a small and medium-sized business because our relationships are different, where things aren't quite so, oh, that's not my job, or oh, that's not your job. In a small and medium-sized business, it's usually a more collaborative space.
I would agree 100%. One of the things that I try to do with our hiring managers here is be curious, right? HR walks into the room and sometimes we have this like, oh, we know what we're doing. We got you. We're good. We got you. We're going to hire that person for you. And that can be really off-putting. But if we're curious as HR people and tell us what this role does, tell us why this role is critical, tell us how this fits in with the bigger part of the organization, give us some understanding of why this position is so important in the process of whatever it is your department does. When we get curious, there becomes this, people like to share what's going on, right? And so you end up with this natural collaboration and conversation versus this one-way dialogue. So I've always found that to be really critical for me in working with hiring managers. I know nothing, pretend I know nothing. Tell me a little bit about this role and why it's important.
Spot on. And you have the opportunity as an SMB, like Jennifer just said, if you're 65 employees, you're 100 employees, whatever it is, you have the opportunity to start developing those relationships and having those conversations early. I think the challenge in collaborating with hiring managers is a role pops up, the hiring manager's antsy to fill it. They want to rush the process along because they need somebody in that seat. And so oftentimes there's the urge to skip steps or speed up the process on the front end to just get to hiring. But the reality is the relationship and those conversations and the seeking to understand has to start much earlier. And again, going back to SMB versus big business, this is your advantage. You have the opportunity to develop those relationships and get to know everybody in the organization. So when the position does come up, you're ready to dive right in with that hiring manager. I think the other thing too is with hiring managers is really getting them to understand why it's so important to work on the process together. Number one, at the end of the day, this hire is going to impact them and impact their team more than anybody else in the organization. So it should matter to them a lot. And in terms of getting their participation, it's about reframing it from, I need you to do this so we can do X, and more from the perspective of, you're the expert. Like, we need you. Your team needs you. You need your own input into the hiring process so we can find the best person for this position. And I think once people understand that why, and you've also done the upfront work to build a relationship with them, it makes it a lot easier to then hop onto that kickoff and get things moving. So even if there is an urgent need, you can work a lot faster because you have developed that rapport and mutual understanding of, expectations for the hiring process.
And to build on that a little bit, Josh, I think in a smaller business, your hiring managers are player coaches, right? Like, there's very few people in a smaller organization who don't work. Like, they all have work. So how am I helping them? Because they still have a ton of work to do. So the way that I can help is if you give me all of the information that I need, then the basic questions that you need answered in order to determine whether or not to even send them to the first, like, what questions are we asking? They know that if I'm asking those questions straight away, either in a one-way video interview or in a phone interview, the people that they're going to see at the very end, they don't have to worry about the basics because I've already covered it.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer. That is like so spot on and so critical. Sorry, Adam. I'm sure you were going to say something.
No. This is, keep going, please.
It is so critical for us to be able to ask the right questions so that they know when they're walking through the door, that they've got the right candidate. And so here's something else that I will also say that I know is a little controversial. Your senior leaders, your hiring managers, the people who are looking for this role should be the next interview that happens. It is not easy for that to be the case, but if you have an HR person and then you have the most junior person, by the time you get to the senior person who's the actual hiring manager, you may or may not have the right people in. But if you can, and I think it's true with small to medium businesses, you can have the more senior people, the hiring managers, involved earlier in the process, which allows them to really, like, these are the people I have vetted. And so by the time you see them, they are the right folks. I believe that they're the right folks for the role. So it all is about this process and this structure. And I think in an SMB, you have the opportunity to create that as long as you have buy-in at all levels of the organization.
Excellent.
And we switch off. I'm so sorry. So Roz, I'm like, this is my favorite thing to talk about. I could talk about this all day. One of the things that we do is sort of switch off. So like I will do the first pass. So like I'll make sure that the hiring manager sees 30 to 50 out of the hundreds that come through. I'm eyes on all of them. And then from what they told me, I know what they're looking for, I think. So then I tell them, go through this 50. Am I on track? And then they'll move them to Spark Hire, which is the one-way video interview. They're responsible for it. So I'm not judging the candidates at all. So they are making the determination at the first step, who's going to move forward? Who am I going to speak to? And then during that phone interview, then I will say, based on the things that you're looking for, here are the questions that I'm asking the same questions of every candidate. I'm sending my scorecards to the hiring manager, and then they decide, yep, these are my 3, these are my 4. And then it goes to the interview team of which they're a part. So I think you can have both. I think you can have both.
Yeah. And Roz, I love that you talked about bringing hiring managers up earlier in the process. I think, there's a number of benefits to this. Number one, as you just mentioned, by bringing them closer to the process, closer to the candidate earlier in the process, you can calibrate a lot quicker on iterations that need to be made to the criteria that you're looking for, the questions that you're asking, the steps in the process, whatever changes or modifications may need to be made, versus getting to the end of the process and realizing, okay, we're off market and we now need to start over, and you waste a whole ton of time doing that. Number two is you need them earlier in the process. As we just talked about, there's an influx of applicants. There's more work to just be done in the front end of the process. And if you are running hiring in HR alongside all the other things that you're doing within the business, you need their involvement earlier in the process just from a capacity standpoint. And then number three, I would say the big intangible benefit of moving the hiring manager up in the process is really from a candidate experience standpoint. When candidates know that hiring managers are engaged and involved earlier in the process, whether they see or hear from them or not, but at least if you're communicating that they are, to candidates, it feels like they're being heard and they're being seen more, instead of like, I got to go through these 5 steps before I even get in front of the person that's going to ultimately end up being my manager. So I think there's just so many reasons that you should constantly be pushing the hiring manager up in the process. Now, that doesn't mean you should be putting them in a step where they're vetting through a ton of people and spending a whole lot of time on the wrong set of people, but that's why you have to address the front end of the process. So as you move them up, the candidates that get to them early in the process are the right candidates.
And you can be transparent about that in the job posting. I see it more and more of like, what to expect from this process. And then it very clearly lays out. And so then they know before they even apply. And that kind of thing can really make a difference.
And I think, thank you all so much. And I think, for hiring managers that haven't experienced both ends of the spectrum, the really large enterprise organization being a hiring manager and the small, like, it may sound like, this small company I'm working for is asking so much of me. Better to be on that end of the spectrum than I've been at the large organization where it's one of my salespeople left. I need to replace them, and the cogs just start moving. And it's all right. We have the job description. We will post the role, and we're going to send you the 200 best applicants that we see come in, and then it lands on your desk. So you lose that aspect of collaboration, and then ultimately lose hiring manager buy-in early in that process. But thank you all. Some great insights there. But I now want to move to that first pillar of recruiting and innovation for SMBs, and that is creating capacity, right? So we talked earlier on about you're wearing a lot of hats, and there's no way of getting around it. You can't be like, well, I'm just going to take that one hat off and I won't do HR for the next few weeks while I'm recruiting. So there's a need to invent capacity. So part one of this question is, I guess, doing some kind of assessment of where the biggest challenges are. It looks like Jennifer's having a bit of a login internet issue. So Roz, we'll definitely start with you on this one. But how do you take that step back and look and say, all right, I need to create capacity. This is how I'm going to start my analysis. You're on mute, Roz. Oh, sorry.
And of course, I had to sneeze at that exact moment.
Oh, bless you.
When you say create capacity, do you mean capacity within the HR department? Do you say a little
capacity for yourself managing recruiting while you're wearing so many different hats?
Yep. I think that there is technology that you can use. We don't use Spark Hire, so let me just say that I'm not pitching them. I don't know the product, but what I do say is that there is technology that can be used that I think we can't rely on it 100%, but we can use it as a tool by which to hire the people that we need to hire. So if we're thinking about all of these different resumes that we're receiving and sort of keywords, how does all of that fit so that I can get the right folks or the folks that I'm looking to hire in a smaller package, so I have the ability to look through them versus trying to go through 500 or 600 resumes.
Yeah, totally. And, I'll reference, somebody gave me this great quote and I use it all the time now, Alex Mosman. So shout out to Alex from Knox County Schools in Tennessee. So school district, not necessarily an SMB, but an under-resourced organization nonetheless. And the phrase that he used was, you need to find or invent new capacity. And I like that because there's really two sides of that. Of course, if you're running hiring within the HR department, there's the pitch to the organization of, at a certain point, it makes sense to build out a talent acquisition team or bring in a dedicated recruiter. So that might be finding capacity. But then there's, okay, you're not going to get approval to do that. So what are you going to do? And that's where you have to invent new capacity. So as Roz said, of course, there's the technology route that you could go. But I think oftentimes, people jump to technology as the solution. And I'm saying that as a technology vendor. And a lot of times I think the first place you should start is really examining your process. Like, what are the bottlenecks in the process that are causing friction and slowing us down and creating drag? And let's smooth those out before we necessarily, go and start adding tools to the mix. Eventually, I think you'll find yourself in a position where you have to do a little bit of both. But to me, it starts with let's analyze the process. Where are we spending, or where are candidates spending the most time in the hiring funnel at what particular stage? And let's start unpacking why, and start to figure out if we can just invent new capacity by modifying our process. And then, we can get into the tools from there.
And that's where your ATS system is critical, right? Because they should be able to look at your process and see, where are the bottlenecks? Is it happening at the first stage where you're sort of reviewing resumes? Is it happening when it goes up to a particular manager? Where is that happening? And so that's where it's using the data to be able to make the informed decisions is a key piece of this. 100% agree, Josh.
I agree as well. And I think that there are certain things, there's an urgency to create inventing capacity, because if you are a talent acquisition person who cares about your candidates, like you care about what their experience is like as a part of their journey as a potential employee, team member, and then alum once they've moved on, that entire journey has to matter. And so for me, it's making sure that there are automatic touch points. They apply, there's an automatically triggered personalized email that goes to them. When they are moved into, the first step of the process, they are informed. If we're not moving forward with their candidacy, they are informed within 24 hours. If they're a specific stakeholder, so if they're an AMA member and they're applying for a job, I have different communications for that too. So that, and we use, their preferred name, their preferred pronouns, because we ask for it in the application, and it's letting them know where they stand. I don't have to do that every single time because I've built it into the ATS that I use. And so it's sometimes, like Roz said, you're doing a lot of work on the kind of on the back end to set the stage so that things can move smoother once you're in it. My one of my mentors, the wonderful Kelly Scullin, she said, hire pants on fire. And it's sort of like, do all of the pre-work so that you can move real fast. And that's something that I try to do with intention.
Great. Thank you for that as well. And when we decide to take that leap, let's say we've worked on our process. Josh, like you said, again, we are the vendors here, but focus on process first. That is hands down the most important thing that you do. And when you've done that and you decide to take on a technology in any aspect of recruiting, whether it's technical testing or behavioral evaluations, whatever it may be, I think that there are recruiters out there or people out there that bring it on and say, once we picked our technology, it's problem solved. And we know that picking the technology is just step one in a new set of challenges that have now opened up for us. So I think my next question, we'll start with you on this one, Jennifer, is what is your method of figuring out, let's say, an easy, user-friendly technology to bring on board versus one that's just going to create more challenges and headaches? Like, what are you prioritizing as you evaluate different technologies for that purpose?
It's a great question. And I think when you work in a small to mid-sized company, finding more bandwidth for yourself is the number one thing, because all of your team members rely on you for the hard moments, really, really hard moments. And so I need to create more mental bandwidth. So one of the things that I will do is go to my network in HR of like, who is in the same size, same revenue that my organization has. Crowdsourcing can be a little bit exhausting and a little bit confusing, but if you know people that are in your same space, you can get ideas. See what works for them. For the AMA, I need tools that can integrate everywhere. So I need to remove as much manual work as I possibly can. So our ATS integrates with DocuSign, with our payroll system, with everything. That was like the number one thing. And so that was the key for me. And that was the thing that I was looking for. It's only going to be as successful as the time that I can spend to put in it.
Great. So we have about 9 minutes left. And while I do want to stay on this topic, I do want us to move over to that next topic and that second pillar of innovation, which ultimately is collaboration. So Roz, question here for you. Have you seen a change, whether it's recent or over the past few years, in the collaboration between hiring managers and recruiters being more proactive than reactive? Like, has that thought started to shift a little bit?
I don't know if it has as of yet. I think what you have now is the advent of AI. You have all of the different products that are out there. And I think we as HR people need to be more intentional about talking with our hiring managers about how to use these technologies, how to use these products to help them get the people that they want in faster. I'm not sure that the conversation is happening yet. I think there's still a lot of hesitancy around utilizing AI in the process because of other risks or other biases that it can create. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. I'm going to take it on myself as the HR person to initiate those conversations. Hiring managers are not going to do that, right? They don't have the time. They don't have the bandwidth. I mean, they just don't. They want that person in that seat. So it's my responsibility to have that conversation in advance, or if not in advance, immediately upon the time that we know that the position needs to be filled. So I'm not sure it's happening yet. I'd be curious to hear Jennifer's perspective. But I think we are responsible for changing that conversation.
I mean, I will say from the AMA side of things, when it comes to recruiting, I don't utilize AI. I believe very, very strongly in people and culture. I believe that I know that candidates utilize AI in their resumes. I know they utilize them in crafting their responses to interview questions. I get it, and that's okay. So it's, it's how can we know what it is that we're looking for? How can we make it happen? Sometimes it's going to mean having more knockout questions that literally call back to the job posting. So it's reiterating, like, we need 3 years experience in HubSpot. How many years of experience in HubSpot do you have? Less than 6 months, 6 months to a year, 1 year to 2 years, 3 years to 4, more than 5. And then it's like, if it's under the threshold, they get an email the next day that says, we're so sorry. I'm not even seeing candidates that are self-identifying as not having the skills they need for this job. So, but those are questions that I have entered in. It still means that I'm still going through hundreds of resumes, but that's okay.
Great. Thank you for that. So, thinking about, Roz, you said bringing in technology to help with collaboration. And again, I open this up to the crowd here. How can technology help streamline collaboration between recruiters and hiring managers or other stakeholders when hiring a role? If anyone wants to jump in on that.
I'll defer to these two experts on their experience with that. But I will say, even going back to the conversation just a second ago about AI, I think the most important thing is you're looking at technology, especially as it relates to working with hiring managers and expectations for hiring managers to use that technology, is you have to take this approach of like problem first, not feature first. And what I mean by that is if you're asking the team to use something, you need to be very clear about what problem that you're hoping to solve with that tool. And we're not just using it because it's this great tool or we're excited about the feature or we're using AI for AI's sake. So I think as you think about collaboration with hiring managers and ultimately getting their buy-in to use whatever you're asking them to use or even do whatever you're asking them to do in terms of the hiring process, it always starts with problem first. So I'll defer to these two on their, real world experience in terms of implementing technology and maybe some examples of how it's helping, them better collaborate with hiring managers. But that's, from a 30,000 foot view, I would say that's my advice to anyone out there.
I'll just say I am 6 months into this role, so stay tuned. We're still figuring it out here, but I'm excited because there are options out there. And being in an SMB, you get the chance, as Jennifer said earlier, to know the people that you're working with and know what the needs are. So I'll let Jennifer answer that question.
So again, I think that technology has its place. I think that technology can aid, it can help. The tools that I use are my assistant as it pertains to talent acquisition. But some of the most impactful tools that you can use with hiring managers and interview teams is having a recruitment and selection process. We actually have a recruitment and selection process map. I go through it with our hiring managers during intake. This is what you're responsible for. This is what I'm responsible for. This is what the flow looks like. If you are not sure what comes next, this is your map. And I refer to it constantly. And it also changes sometimes because, our platforms change and the way that we handle candidates changes. But when you have that set, that can really help. Having interviewing 101 training with all team members, all of them, interns, C-suite, vice presidents, individual contributors, they know exactly what's expected of them when they are part of an interview team. Hiring managers' expectations. This is what I need from you in order for this process to work. Because we are so small, these one-to-one touch points are going to matter because we're building the teams that they need. And so I cannot rely on technology to make that happen. So I need the hiring manager to see their fingerprints on the success of their team because they worked with me to help them get the right person for the right role at the right time. And there is no technology in the world that can make that happen. So that's my take.
I love it.
I have big feelings.
I love it. I love here that I know this session is talking about recruitment process innovation, and I know oftentimes innovation is associated with technology and shiny new objects. But I think, here the key takeaway here is innovation is improvement. And so the way I would look at it is it's really three things with technology at the end. It's people, it's process, it's technology, in that order. Jennifer hit on it earlier. It's people, it's developing those relationships, having those conversations, having empathy for your hiring managers, building that trust to establish a strong foundation. It's process, so you have something to use that foundation to run. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So you don't have which I love this phrase, hire to hire, pants on fire situation. And then technology is last. I think sometimes, people think innovation and it's like they start at the end, they look for technology to solve all their upstream problems. But I really think it's in that order. It's people, process, technology, and they all play a role in better hiring at SMBs. But I think, you got to follow that order of operations to ultimately get to the best outcome.
And one last thing, and I know we're at time, but we're in a workforce that has 4 to 5 generations in it. And all of those generations have different needs. They have different ways that they communicate, different ways that they want to move throughout the process. And being able to effectively communicate and problem solve is evergreen. And so whether you can do that one-on-one or whether you can do that through a shared document, through a Zoom chat, through a process, through notes in an ATS, all of those things are valid. But it's a skill. It's very much a skill.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone so much. We are at time. We're going to spend one last minute. I think it would be great, for everyone listening here who learned a ton, but for all of our SMB recruiters that are dealing with tight budgets, if we could give them in one sentence, one actionable piece of advice, if each of you could throw out one specific sentence, one thing that they could do to jumpstart to an easier path forward, what's that one sentence? I know this is the hardest question I've asked so far, but what is that one question? What is that one sentence?
Create a framework for what success looks like.
Great.
I would say build trust.
Excellent.
I don't know if it's cheating to go back to the last thing I just said, but I would just say people, process, technology in that order.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, thank everyone for joining. Roz, Jennifer, Josh, thank you so much for, as I expected, a fantastic panel. Please connect with us on LinkedIn, everyone who's listening. We love to build our recruiting network. So don't hesitate to reach out, find us on LinkedIn. But I hope everyone has a great rest of the day and enjoys the rest of the sessions. Thank you all very much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.